G'day, mate. 40 here. Right, a lot of news to get to, but going for the big picture today, Christianity was a dominant force in this country, but now, if you hold by Christian traditional standards, right, you are going to be ostracized frequently. So, living in a whole new world, and I think the epic sea change began with the Obergefell decision, legalizing gay marriage in every state in the Union. The entire history of Judaism and Christianity is entirely opposed to same-sex sex among men. And so once you had the Obergefell decision, all right, that was the marker between a country that was perhaps neutral towards Christianity to a country that's now become actively hostile towards Christianity. So how do Christians live in such a world? Well, let's contrast that with the conventional wisdom. So we've got the New York Times here. People are going silent. Ooh, fearing retribution. Trump critics muzzle themselves. Sounds pretty scary.
People are going silent. Fearing retribution. Trump critics muzzle themselves. This article is by Elizabeth Boomiller and read by an automated voice. The silence grows louder every day. Fired federal workers who are worried about losing their homes ask not to be quoted by name. University presidents, fearing that millions of dollars in federal funding could disappear, are holding their fire. Chief executives alarmed by tariffs that could hurt their businesses are on mute. Even longtime Republican hawks on Capitol Hill, stunned by President Trump's revisionist history that Ukraine is to blame for its invasion by Russia, and his Oval Office blow-up at President Volodymyr Zelensky, have either muzzled themselves, tiptoed up to criticism without naming Mr. Trump, or completely reversed their positions. More than 6 weeks into the second Trump administration, there is a chill spreading over political debate in Washington and beyond. People on both sides of the aisle, who would normally be part of the public dialogue about the big issues of the day, say they are intimidated by the prospect of online attacks from Mr. Trump and Elon Musk, concerned about harm to their companies and frightened for the safety of their families. Politicians fear banishment by a party remade in Mr. Trump's image and the prospect of primary opponents financed by Mr. Musk, the president's all-powerful partner and the world's richest man. When you see important societal actors, be it university presidents, media outlets, CEOs, mayors, governors, changing their behavior in order to avoid the wrath of the government, that's a sign that we've crossed the line into some form of authoritarianism, said Stephen Levitsky, a professor of government at Harvard and the co-author of the influential 2018 book, How Democracies Die. Mr. Trump ran.
Oh my God, democracies are dying. Look, this is just called another Thursday for conservatives. All right, conservatives, far more than liberals, don't speak out on political issues because they fear being called racist. And most conservatives don't have at hand any useful way of defending themselves if they're called racist. So conservatives are used to stifling themselves in the workplace and in social settings. And it's been this way for decades, but it got particularly intense over the past 15 years. So there's not one word in this article about what is a fact of life for conservatives. Consider the mainstream conservative position on all sorts of different issues would simply get you canceled in large swaths of American elite life. You would automatically lose your social media accounts if you invoked traditional conservative approaches to many issues. For example, the Bible is adamant, and the Jewish and Christian traditions are adamant, that sex between men is an abomination. If you were to say that out loud in a social setting or in a workplace, all right, you'd get fired, you'd lose your social media accounts, all right, you might even get debanked, all right, it'd mark you out as a radical. In the United Kingdom, if they catch you praying near an abortion clinic, they might, well, interrogate you about, sir, what are you praying about? Right? It's illegal to pray silently to yourself. You'll be interrogated by police. What are you praying about if you're anywhere near an abortion clinic? The traditional understanding that different groups have different gifts, right? Most blindingly obvious truth, right, up there with the laws of gravity, all right? And that will constantly get you fired, will get you shunned, will get you ostracized. And people naturally react to ostracism and cancellation and getting fired and getting kicked out of a community. People often react to that based on our evolutionary heritage that it's a death sentence, right? Conservatives have been dealing with this stuff that now the liberals are complaining about for decades, right? Recognizing that personality traits overwhelmingly have overwhelmingly the odds are that personality traits have a genetic component, right? Pointing out something so obvious, such as musical parents tend to have musical kids, smart parents tend to have smart kids, athletic parents tend to have athletic kids, right? Highly social parents tend to have highly social kids. Musically gifted parents tend to have musically gifted kids, and there's probably a genetic component there, right? That'll get you ostracized, get you fired, get you canceled for noting such obvious facts that personality traits, from height to intelligence to personality to religiosity to political predispositions, right, will get you canceled, will get you fired. So everything liberals are complaining about here, conservatives have been dealing with for decades. So cry me a river. Right. When you see important societal actors changing their behavior to avoid the wrath of the government, that's a sign we've crossed the line into some form of authoritarianism. Right. Co-author of the influential 2018 book, How Democracies Die. Well, conservatives have had to navigate the wrath of the government under Joe Biden. All right. Conservatives who would protest outside abortion clinics or who would speak up at town hall meetings were getting investigated. Tea Party nonprofits, right? They would be denied nonprofit status by the IRS. So conservatives just take this for granted, that they have to navigate ostracism and litigation and disruption and imprisonment by the government. Now liberals are learning the same thing. Right? Why wasn't that a slide into outright authoritarianism when conservatives could not be conservative without getting fired, canceled, losing their social media accounts? Trump ran in 2024 promising retribution against his enemies. Right? Is there anyone who was run for president who hasn't essentially operated with some vengeance? Right? All punishment contains an element of vengeance. And politics means usually rewarding your friends and punishing your enemies. One prominent first-term critic said of Mr. Trump that not only would he not comment, he did not want to be mentioned in this article at all. Every time his name appears in public, the threats against him from the far right increase. Okay, what about those people who donated to the proposition in California that marriage is only between a man and a woman? All right, they got threatened, they got canceled, they got fired, they had everything that could be socially taken away from them, often taken away from them by those in power, simply because they stood with a definition of marriage that is the only one that humanity has known, that marriage is between a man and a woman. Right? There has never been a society until recently that's had men marrying men. Right? There's absolutely no precedent for that. So someone who stands in line of all of civilization going back for thousands of years, that marriage is only between a man and a woman, right? They get canceled, they get fired, they get threats against them. So finally, the shoe's a little bit on the other foot. So yeah, why would MAGA not be a little bit vengeful after being on the receiving end from our elites and the news media and the Joe Biden administration? Almost all of our institutions are in the hands of people who are left of center. To say you believe in God puts you outside the realm of the educated class, the elite class in this country. So finally, all right, MAGA is in power and they actually know what they're doing. And like every other movement that takes power after a time of persecution, right, they are ready to aggressively promote their side. Right, so many people are not speaking out, fearing retribution. Well, that's the way it's been for people who are outside of the elite perspective on gay marriage, on the importance of genetics for personality and personality traits such as intelligence, for the recognition that different peoples have different gifts, that the gifts of the Iranian people are somewhat different from the gifts of the Korean people, who are in turn somewhat different from the gifts of those of West African origins versus East African origins versus Central American origins versus South American origins versus Native Australian origins, right? Just recognizing that different people have different gifts, all right? That will get you canceled. My God, there's pressure now on intellectual life. And so Michael Roth, the president of Wesleyan University, so you would think this would be a Christian university, but he's speaking up in favor of diversity, equity, and inclusion. In other words, he's speaking up for discriminating against white people. People tell me that I have courage. And he says, I'm a little neurotic Jewish kid from Long Island. I'm afraid of everything. It's a scandal that the federal government is trying to keep people from speaking their minds. How is the federal government trying to keep people from speaking their minds? I don't get that. All right. If you participate in public life, you are going to get threats. That's the way it's always been. That's the way it will always be. Since when have people been able to participate in controversial hot-button issues in the United States, and I would assume pretty much any country, and there are no threats? That you get to be a hero on the cheap. You get to speak out on hot-button topics, controversial topics. You get to be a hero, and you don't have to fear any retribution. You don't have to fear any vengeance. You don't have to fear any blowback. That's not how the world works. It has never worked that way. This is not something that's brand new under this Trump administration. It's just that this time, for the first time in a long time, the right seems to know what they're doing. Totally reasonable to be worried, says Mark Elias. Right, so Mark Elias is a prominent Democratic lawyer who has helped Democrats game the electoral system for decades. He's very good at what he does. And now he's complaining about the mob that Donald Trump unleashes. Well, what about the mob that Mark Elias and Black Lives Matter unleash? Right? You want a mob? Black Lives Matter unleashed far more of a mob than any MAGA movement. Right? MAGA is nothing, is a tea party compared to the terrorism, the murder, the mayhem, the destruction wrought by Black Lives Matter and Antifa. But Antifa, Black Lives Matter, left-wing terrorism, the persecution of conservatives, right, gets no mention. No mention in this article. And so various Democrats says, oh, we're just in a mode of self-preservation. I remember I would go for months, maybe years, into therapy saying, I'm just in survival mode. What it really meant was I didn't want to do the hard work necessary to build a better life. And so in survival mode, I then felt free to do whatever I needed to do to survive, right? There's tremendous ethical freedom with survival mode. And so all sorts of people on the left are now saying, we're in survival mode, because when you're in survival mode, there are no limits to what you need to do. You're trying to survive, bro. Anything you need to do to survive, how could anyone have an argument against survival? Right? How is survival a bad thing? And so people love the ethical freedom that comes with survival mode, because then you can do anything you need to do. You can cut corners. Off you go.
Disarray. The paddle-wielding losers who couldn't clap for a kid with brain cancer are discovering new ways to embarrass their party that is currently less popular than a venereal disease. And after that god-awful copy and paste travesty we showed you the other day, the Democrats are LARPing as street fighters.
Choose your character.
Whoa, powerful. Boy.
The embarrassment doesn't end there. Democrats are reportedly knifing one another over the lack of leadership and direction on how to respond to the president. And John Fetterman is torching their paddle protest by calling it, quote, A sad cavalcade of cell phones and unhinged petulance. It only makes Trump look more presidential and restrained. We're becoming the metaphorical car alarms that nobody pays attention to, and it may not be the winning message. And earlier, the grumpy ponytail rocking Democrat who heckled the president's speech, Rep. Al Green, getting censured by Congress, leading Democrats to burst out in song.
And that Representative Al Green be censured with public reading of this resolution by the Speaker.
So who can turn around this dumpster fire? Tampon Tim. He's getting his name out there, bashing Trump, but he has no answers on who will fill the void.
The idea of a president standing at that rostrum and throwing a slur at a United States senator in the middle because you disagree on policy is absolutely ridiculous.
Sir, who do you think the leader of the Democratic Party is right now?
I think the voting public right now is what I would say, and I keep telling that. We're not going to have a charismatic leader ride in here and save us from this.
Dana Perino.
Well, it's interesting to hear him say that because the bar is so low that even Greg could step over it.
Oh!
Wow. In your face.
Unnecessary. The show just started, Dana.
And I'm actually makes news every other minute.
You know, Greg, you don't have to be told by a consultant to act like a child. You are a child.
That is true. I'm a child at heart.
You are.
Mainly because I have the heart of a child inside me. Thank you, Dr. Stevens. It's great to watch Democrats try to connect with the youth vote, you know, through pop culture with this choose your fight. When are they going to start eating Tide Pods? Come on, guys. Come on. I want to see it. I want to see it. You know, they're in a pickle. And I don't know how they're going to get out of this. Trump is blessed with this advantage where the left starts with a fact and then creates a delusion to invalidate the fact. Let's say the fact is boys and girls are different. So the left runs that through the gender delusion mill and proceeds unchallenged for years because the media are cowards. Then Trump comes in and he reverses the trajectory. He says kids identifying as trans, big lie. And everybody just breathes a sigh of relief. And he's doing this, by the way, with not just with trans, but open borders and with crime. He's pulling the rug out from under the left-wing delusion, and people are cheering. But that rug is also underneath the Democratic Party. So I have a theory. I know a lot of people suffered from 2020 to 2024, but it was great that Biden won. I'd like to thank the media for rigging the election through censorship, suppression, and hoaxes. And by pushing especially the five people hoax, with which Biden credited for him entering the race. Because what that got is the Democrat Party to expose itself to all in its current shape. It was unchallenged for years. Now you can see it as morally and mentally bankrupt. You know, now, you know how Democrats always say, it's good to be seen. You need to be seen. Are you being seen? Well, now you're being seen by all of America, and you're making them vomit because you believe trans men have more rights than real girls, or that open borders trump security and safety of a country, and that crime is only pursued if it benefits you politically. All this stuff is killing you. I don't know any way back. So to my point, the Biden presidency taught the American public that all of the irrational behavior from 2016 to 2020 wasn't caused by Trump, because it got worse when Trump left. So Trump wasn't the virus they were saying. He was the vaccine, except in this case, it works.
Speaking of which.
All right, have you heard about Renn? Maybe I can find some videos of Renn. So he's a Christian, a business consultant. He writes on Substack. He's not a clergyman, but he's got a new book out about Christians in a negative world. Oh, he's got his own show here. Right, New York, America's first post-secular city. So this is Renn. Let's
not on Gomorrah anymore here in New York. We're we've had so much religious growth in New York that you can't say that, oh, this is the secular city. As you know, in 1963, Harvey Cox published a famous book called The Secular City. And it wasn't specifically about New York, but many people applied it to New York, and New York was getting more and more secular. That is, what does it mean, secular? It means that religion is not seen as something that you talk about in public or that you use to guide your ideas about public policy or about life in the city. At the most, you can have a religion that's private. The public square is off limits. And furthermore, that religion is decreasing and declining and disappearing, maybe. And so the secular mentality, based on various, maybe reason or whatever, but not religious, is triumphant. And so to argue, to have good reasons for something, you can't invoke religious reasons. You can only invoke secular reasons.
All right, so Aaron Renn. Remember that name? Check him out on Substack. Long article about him in the New York Times. He gave a name to what many Christians feel. So he's got a new book out. It's called Life in the Negative World. And so he warns Christians that America is in an era of distinct hostility to believers such as them. They must gird themselves to adapt to life in the negative world. And so he's got this scheme in modern American history, he says, can be divided into three epochs when it comes to the status of Christianity. In a positive world between 1964 and 1994, being a Christian in America generally enhanced one's social status. It was a good thing to be known as a churchgoer, and Christian moral norms were the basic norms of the broader American culture. Then, in a neutral world, which lasted between 1994 until 2014, right, Christianity no longer had a privileged status, but it was just one of many valid options in a pluralist public square. Then, about a decade ago, right, around the time the Supreme Court ruling in Obergefell versus Hodges made same-sex marriage legal nationwide, the United States became a negative world. Right, this is not accidental. All right, the notion of identifying as gay is completely foreign, is completely antithetical, is an abomination from almost any traditional way of life of which I'm aware. So Judaism and Christianity and trad ways of life are fully aware that there will be people who will have same-sex sex, but that you would then base your identity on having same-sex sex is foreign to most traditional conceptions of life. So the more tolerance shown towards same-sex sex between men and the gay identity, and then finally same-sex marriage, you will then have to be less tolerant towards Christianity, right? Gay rights and Christian rights are antithetical. Gay rights and status of women are antithetical, right? Gay rights and Judaism, gay rights and any traditional conception of life, any traditional way of living life are in opposition. So I understand why people who identify as gay and being gay is a big deal to them. In all likelihood, if they have any rationality, they should hate Judaism and Christianity, because Judaism and Christianity are completely opposed to this identity as known as gay, and they're completely opposed to celebrating same-sex marriage. So as soon as the United States decided to celebrate same-sex marriage with the Obergefell ruling, right, Christianity could not help but enter into a negative space. And any trad way of life could not help but enter into the realization that America was now a negative space. My love for the United States of America took a dramatic decline after the Obergefell decision. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. I felt that America had just gone to hell. And from many perspectives within Orthodox Judaism, an Orthodox Jew is not allowed to live in a society with same-sex marriage, because such a society has reached a state of such dramatic moral decline that you have to flee. So from an Orthodox Jewish perspective, a Jew would be far better off living in Putin's Russia than in the United States of America or any advanced economy that has same-sex marriage. right? There's no notion of same-sex marriage in Judaism and Christianity, right? This is an abomination from a traditional perspective, and so as soon as you celebrate same-sex marriage, you have to castigate Judaism, Christianity, and the trad way of life. You can't just be fine with both. It doesn't work that way, right? One rises and the other falls, right? If Judaism and Christianity get stronger in society, then gay rights will decline. Trans rights will decline. If trans rights and gay rights become stronger and more celebrated in society, then Christian and Jewish identity will become more difficult. So Christians, especially in high status domains, right, have increasingly encountered opposition over the past few decades. So he's talking about America as a whole, but in all sorts of areas, probably from the 1950s on, being a Christian was a detriment. So being in highly educated elite circles, being a Christian, being an Orthodox Jew, being a believer in God, being trad, being a nationalist, being a tribalist, being someone who recognizes that different people have different gifts, that there are just two sexes, male and female, right? This is low status. This is a cause for ostracism and banishment and cancellation. So in the university and in elite spaces, in cultural spaces that are overwhelmingly dominated by the left, in much of corporate life, where you got DEI and pro-gay and all sorts of other woke causes, right? Being a Christian or a Jew, you will be in opposition to that particular space, right? There is a new public moral order, and it is effectively anti-Christian, anti-Jewish, anti-traditional, anti-trad, anti-nationalist, anti-tribalist, tribalist, anti-real, anti-recognition of Darwinian evolution through natural selection via the survival of the fittest. Affects how people think as well. It affects brains, and it's been going on over the past 10,000 years. So Crossing is a large evangelical church in Columbia, Missouri, and it sponsored and it supported a local secular film festival for years. And this was noted positively in many national publications, including the New York Times. The church worked hard to win trust and to cultivate a relationship with the local creative community. But when a pastor at the church preached in 2019 that God is not pleased when we blur genders, the film festival had to bow to a communal outcry and cut those ties. And he used genders, right? Genders is such a pause term. Sex is the biological term, right? Gender is a social construct. But sex is real, sex is biological, sex matters, right? Sex is important for identity. So Christians who hold traditional beliefs about a whole range of social and political issues, and non-Christians who hold traditional beliefs about a whole range of social and political issues are increasingly treated as pariahs by our secular elites who dominate almost all of our institutions, even when the Christians and the trads go to great effort to avoid giving gratuitous offense. Right, so this goes way beyond cancel culture. Right, what we have here is a whole-scale skepticism and opposition to traditional beliefs and behaviors and rituals, particularly in domains like academia, the professions, and the corporate world. Right, so this negative world construct is speaking to hundreds of thousands of people in this country, right? Better than any other construct that they've encountered. Oh, this is why this is happening. This explains the world that we're living in. If you're struggling with a problem, but you can't give the problem a name, it makes the problem so much worse. When I finally got the name chronic fatigue syndrome or ADHD or narcissistic personality disorder, it came as a great relief to get a name for something that I was struggling with. So now you have pastors releasing podcast series about how to survive as Christians and in the Christian ministry in a negative world. Now, many Protestants find Protestantism just way too feminine, right? Just not very masculine. And so they are often choosing to go the Orthodox route, right? Young single men are leaving traditional churches for a more masculine alternative. And you see this particularly in the alt-right. Young single men are flocking to the Orthodox Church after discovering the masculine Christian religion through online influences. Many converts to Orthodoxy say they felt disillusioned with the feminization of the Protestant churches, and they were attracted, right, to the masculinity of the Orthodox Church, the authenticity of Orthodoxy. They say it pushes them physically and mentally. So there are now a tsunami of young men who converted to Orthodox Christianity since the pandemic. Matthew Ryan, former atheist, found Orthodox Christianity after he saw a comment about good and evil on YouTube after hitting rock bottom. What drew me to Orthodoxy was the structure, the guidance, the authenticity, and the historicity. So they're drawn to the masculine nature of the church, which puts an emphasis on denial and pushing yourself physically. Worshippers must stand for long services, which can last upwards of 5 hours. They must fast too, sometimes up to 40 days. They felt this was in stark contrast to other religious denominations where they felt that the church had been feminized. So one former wrestler belonged to a Protestant church, but he felt his services were not too different from his Saturday night in a bar. They had the same kind of lighting, the same kind of music, the same kind of feeling. And after reading the Gospels, I knew this is not how they worshiped 2,000 years ago. I knew, hey, I'm not in the right church. So he sought something that embodied the teachings and practices of the early Christians. And he found that at St. Ignatius Orthodox Christian Church near his home in Mesa. So men need spaces just for men. All right. So Orthodox Judaism has special rituals just for men. Roman Catholicism has special areas of life just for men. And Orthodox Christianity has a special role just for men. Right? He wanted to reject the feminization of other Christian denominations. It's unfortunate that feminism has sunk its teeth into all our organizations, including Christianity. He said at Protestant churches, the majority of the leaders aren't good, strong men, whereas in the Orthodox Church, leaders are more like father figures. All right, this is reflecting a reality. All right, Protestantism is much more feminine than Orthodox Christianity, Orthodox Judaism, and Roman Catholicism. Right? Orthodox church leaders look like men. They look like fathers. They are strong, spiritually, mentally, physically. Young men right now are yearning to follow a good father. Young men who don't have a relationship with their fathers, they're very likely to start eroticizing male attention and to become gay. Right? Jesus called down all of heaven's armies to destroy his enemies. I'm comfortable with physicality because of my Orthodox faith. I am comfortable of violence towards those who would harm those I love. Young men, that's what they want. Right. This rings true, man. I see this. People want traditional male-female roles. Right? Men naturally want to be masculine. It's a tougher form of Christianity. Right? So Christianity with self-denial, with real results to bring peace and joy to the heart like nothing else. Many men in the parish have started taking cold plunges as well as making their fast more extreme to push themselves. The challenge of the Orthodox Church appeals to young men. It's challenging physically, spiritually, and majority are finding the church online. We had to enlist volunteers to help with the tsunami of people coming in. And so one of the advantages when you join this type of group is that you know what your role is. Right? You don't have to worry about what's your role in life. And so there was a boom starting in 2020, people looking online, right? Looking for a muscular Christianity, looking for a strong man religion, looking for something militarized, hard, something that's challenging, aesthetically challenging, physically challenging, that's somewhat strict. Right? There is a tremendous relief in structure, in ritual, in roles, in definitions. Right? Pro-Christian morality. Right, pretty cool stuff.
But that started to change because the secular city failed. It was a terrible disaster. It was certainly a disaster for the churches, the synagogues, the mosques, mainly churches and synagogues in New York at that time. They decreased, so that by 1975, the New York Times ran a series of articles in August of that year saying the churches and the synagogues and other religious groups feel on the defensive, shrinking, and, woe is me. And it's true. The city was also in disaster since at least 65. And it was many places were burning down. So a lot of hundreds of synagogues left, for example. Hundreds of synagogues left the South Bronx. There used to be a lot of synagogues in the Bronx. Now there's only, in the South Bronx, there's only the remnant of one. Though there may be some new things going on today. But and then in the Riverdale section, there's some synagogues. That's a rich part of the Bronx. But they were retreating, and the churches were burning down and closing up. One pastor in Harlem said, when I take a collection plate, I keep a shotgun under the pulpit. And the police were, many of the police were corrupt or not effective, and the leadership that they were under was not very good. So that became, and people sort of adjusted that and says, well, New York's a tough, secular, gritty city, and we don't have any of this namby-pamby of the suburbs. And Times Square, we like it to where there are peep shows every other doorway. But the city was actually just burning down around them. One, as you know, there was a famous book called The Bronx is Burning. And that actually happened. But it was accompanied by a disastrous decline in the number of visibility of religion and religion sites in the city. And furthermore, the elite, who were somewhat insulated from the reality on the streets, like in the universities, were very secular. And there was a Dissent magazine, a socialist magazine, published a special edition on New York City. Said, "What is the city?" And what's interesting about this sociological, psychological exploration of the city.
Democratic presidential hopeful splits with the party over a major issue. And China says it is ready for war with the U.S. We'll take a look at its military buildup. President Trump is postponing his 25% tariffs on many imports from Mexico and some from Canada.
Okay, we'll keep an eye on the news. All right, Aaron Renn, just learned about him today. He's on the left here.
That didn't work out so well, and people started turning around looking, but they were resisted when they did that. But religion grew starting in 1978. That's the pivotal year. 50 years ago was 1975 when the New York Times article came out. 1978, you started to see visibly changes. Not the city didn't see the changes, but statistically you started to see the changes. Church planting for the first time went beyond replacement value. Up to that point, actually the number of new churches opened, they couldn't keep up with the number of churches being closed. And so churches were still being planted, but they just couldn't keep up, and the number of churches closing was really high. But in 1978, for the first time, you see a pop-up, 150% or more pop-up in the number of churches that were being formed. Now, nobody noticed this. It just because they were scattered all.
Okay, back to the New York Times article here on Aaron Renn. So negative world is now the dominant framework for many people trying to understand their place in contemporary America, right? You don't have to be Christian to understand that the elites and that most of our institutions are a negative world for people with traditional values. That's just a recognition of reality. And so when the tide is going against you, you have to work harder just to stay even. And so Christians who are working harder, right, they get called Christian nationalists, and also other people are ethno-nationalists or various types of nationalists because they have to swim so hard against the tide of degeneracy and AIDS and the pause. So negative world, it's a very effective frame for where we're living. You know, you've got a winner when people adopt your vocabulary without attribution. So Aaron Renn, he's got a gift for the pithy, direct social analysis. Now he's wondering if a new epoch is dawning under Donald Trump. So he lived in Chicago in the 2000s. Then he began reading and listening to sermons by a Presbyterian pastor in Manhattan, the Reverend Tim Keller, who is popular among urban creative class evangelicals. And he said Christianity is not right or left, and the church can minister and appeal to urbanites without compromising its core beliefs. So Renn, always politically conservative, but dipped in and out of serious faith. He was now convinced by Christianity. He sought out a church, and he settled in, and then he followed this typical trajectory that was described by 20th century sociologist E. Digby Baltzell. Typical American is born a Baptist or Methodist. Seventh-day Adventism comes from Methodism. Becomes a Presbyterian once he is educated, and then, after ascending to the heights of economic success, he then joins a fashionable Episcopal church to satisfy his wife's social ambitions. So the Episcopal Church, otherwise known as the Anglicans, right? That's the most prestigious, highest IQ Christian church. And this is a big story here in the New York Times. He gave a name to what many Christians feel. And the feeling isn't good. Gained a following by warning the U.S. is currently a negative world for Christianity. All right, it's a 23-minute story here. Goes on and on and on. But Kip says liberalism is the corrosive that has created wishy-washy churches and societies. So he's married for 8 years in Chicago. Then he got a divorce. He felt quite low. And he was so low that he listened to a podcast hosted by Mike Cernovich. He learned about strength training. He started strength training. He began feeling better about his body. So if you are awkward in your body, you're going to feel awkward emotionally and cognitively and socially. If you are weak in your body, you're going to feel weak emotionally and socially and cognitively and physiologically and emotionally and psychologically and spiritually and religiously. You're going to feel weak. If you are tight in your body, all right, you're going to be tight and awkward in your emotions and your social interactions and your relationship with yourself. If you are strong and free in your body, you're much more likely to feel strong and free, right, with your soul, with your spirit. So he began strength training. Then from another right-wing influencer, he honed his eye contact. And he began wondering why contemporary American churches had so little to say about so many fundamental realities he was encountering, such as online dating. And he says these right-wing influencers, they've cracked the code on reaching young men. They're giving practical advice, and many of the things that the church is telling these guys is just wrong. So was Keller right about the evangelical church's place in 21st century America? Could a winsome Christian with conservative views be welcomed by the liberal establishment in the same way that Billy Graham was when invited to speak to the country after the attacks of September 11, 2001? So one answer came in 2017 when Pastor Keller was selected to receive a major prize for excellence in Reformed theology and public witness to be awarded at Princeton Theological Seminary. But then students, alumni, and faculty at the liberal seminary protested because Mr. Keller's denomination does not ordain women or LGBTQ people. School backed down. Keller delivered a lecture. He did not receive the prize. So Aaron Renn sketched out his first public version of his negative world framework in his email newsletter in the fall of 2017. He described the negative world and included the spread of sports gambling, legalized drugs, and tattoos. And I hope he would have mentioned same-sex marriage. So many people immediately responded. Many Christians were used to being called stupid for their beliefs. They were called hateful and hurtful for their beliefs about marriage and sex. And many Christians were not ready. So on the Christian right, evangelical Christian right, if Christians are no longer a moral majority but a moral minority, they must shift tactics. They should be less concerned about persuading the rest of the country that they are relevant and that they can fit in secular spaces. They don't. Instead, they must abandon mainstream institutions such as public schools and build their own alternatives. They must pursue ownership of businesses and real estate so that they are less vulnerable to cancellation. They must stop triangulating away from difficult teachings on matters like sex and gender. But there's a huge elite versus pew difference, right? The clergy in Protestantism tend to hold to the same views as other members of the educated elite, while the pew tends to vote for Donald Trump. So there's a huge difference between the pulpit and the pew. Like the Hebrews crossing the Jordan after 40 years in the deserts, evangelical Christians have entered unfamiliar territory. Finding a path in this fundamentally unknown world will require a different approach from the strategies of the past. So let me play a little bit more from this interview.
All over the place. But as we collected data on every church in the city, we started looking at their founding dates. And you start to see a pop-up in 1978. Now, that started to affect, after some years, a decade, 2 decades more, started to affect that the city maybe is not so secular. But it's still secular. There's still secularists here, still people that dislike religion and declaim it. But it started to change, and it accelerated in 2000. And we started, I started to write on this, that the city was changing, and people would say, oh, that's not true, you know, it's the monarchy. I started writing on it actually in, you know, the 90s, 1990, probably in the late 80s. I said, there's a change going on. And I brought this to some Christian institutional leaders, and they said, no, there's no churches in the city. There's no new churches. Well, it wasn't true then, but they didn't see the growth. And it was hard to see. So I asked people to come together to bring new Korean pastors together. And we met in a Korean church they had just built. Something that the white evangelical and others, even black and Latino evangelicals, really didn't know about. Is also
yeah, often base Koreans are much more base than their white and Latino and black counterparts. Rooftop Koreans showing us the way.
So where are these new churches coming from? And there were other religions that were opening up too. The Hindus opened up a temple in Flushing, and the mosques, there was some mosques that were beginning to open. And
so for many trads, the last few months have been exhilarating. Right, Donald Trump became president. Tech companies are pivoting to the right. Bible sales are booming. The decline in the share of Americans who say they are Christians has stopped. Celebrities, activists, and former atheists are publicly converting to Christianity. In January, a young Christian evangelical apologist, Wesley Huff, appeared on the Joe Rogan show. It was called The Furthest Reaching Gospel Broadcast in History. And then a few days before Trump's inauguration, Renn devoted an installment of his newsletter to the question many of his readers' mind: is the negative world for Christians coming to an end? So he notes, with Joe Rogan and many other secular figures either converting to Christianity or becoming Christian friendly, is the negative world identified coming to an end? Do we have an anti-progressive vibe shift? When we stake ourselves out on something, it's difficult to back down. Usually people keep doubling down. I don't want to be like that. I do see a conservative shift in the culture, he writes. The far left overplayed their hand. There is a correction in a more right-wing direction. We see it in Silicon Valley. We see it in the institutional acceptance of Donald Trump's victory. We need it in the views of center-left Democrats who are attacking progressives. There's a new openness to Christianity. Some of the more overt forms of hostility to Christianity will abate, but there is still widespread hostility to most socially conservative legislation. Right, try to ban abortion, see what happens. So I think the culture will be resolutely post-Christian in its ethical values. See this in the second Trump campaign administration, which mostly adopted socially moderate positions on porn, pot, gambling. The norms around things like marital fidelity are probably not coming back anytime soon.
And it started to change. Well, but I couldn't seem to get attention of the city intellectual and political leaders. And so I started writing more popular. I was sociologist by background, writing, doing reporting on these, and finally, and it started changing. You could tell that since 78 to 2000, there was a growth. In 2000 and after 9/11, there was even more growth. And
there are apparently a whole bunch of states that are now much more restrictive with regard to pornography. So I didn't know about this, but I just got tipped off.
People think that there's something sacred about that. The act of creation itself has anything attached to it.
Go here.
I want to talk about the legality of sex work more, in that laws around pornography are changing, and the discourse around pornography is also changing. And, there's dozens of states now where you can't really access porn like you used to 5 years ago.
Really?
I'm living in one of them.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Oh, you don't know this? You haven't? Word hasn't spread to your part of town? Yeah.
I heard about Louisiana or Texas, one of them, sort of throttling Pornhub or something.
Virginia also.
Okay.
Quite a few. It's in the dozens now, I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
But the laws are you need to verify like your ID.
Oh,
you
age.
need age verification.
Yeah.
And the way you verify that with the state is by creating an account and submitting a photo of your state ID.
Right.
So who's going to do that? Who's going to upload their driver's license to create a porn account? No.
with the state of Indiana.
Yeah. 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 Well, either you're going to get put on a list by the cops, or you're going to get identity theft by a fraud porn site or something, or you're just begging for identity theft. So
wow.
Also, because this matters, the companies, I think most of the ones run by MindGeek, I think all the ones run by the big conglomerate MindGeek have shut down the porn sites in all the states that are doing this instead of complying. So they've just shut down the websites in these states, I think, in order to pressure people to lobby. But again, who's going to lobby their congressman and say, I want my porn back. I don't want to go to a DVD store anymore. Like, who's gonna be the person to swallow their pride?
You mean besides?
Okay, that sounds like an important development. All right, so Aaron Renn, he had a thoughtful post here. Real elite people reconcile and move on. So venture capitalist Mark Andreessen had made a number of tweets critical of Pat Soon-Shiong, the billionaire owner of the Los Angeles Times. So this is how Soon-Shiong reacted. He sent out this tweet. Is this you, Mark? You hedging your endorsements? But you're not the only one who makes mistakes. I've made some, like endorsing Karen Bass. That's a big reason we didn't endorse Kamala. I don't have the luxury of a hedge. Now is the time for leadership. Now I welcome you to join our editorial board to be part of the solution. I hope you will. So he calls out Mark Andreessen, but he admits his own mistakes. He extends an olive branch, invites Mark Andreessen to join the Los Angeles Times editorial board, and this is how Mark Andreessen responded. I removed my tweets critical of Dr. Soon-Shiong. It's time for a big tent for people who are figuring things out. We all learn. So this is how the big boys operate. They frequently avoid getting mired in pointless conflict that isn't related to some core objective.
This voiceover is AI generated. The theologian Carl Trueman has a gift for taking complicated scholarly ideas, synthesizing them, and then representing them in a form ordinary people can take in and understand. He did this, for example, in his book, The Rise and Triumph of the Modern Self. He has a brand new book that does this for critical theory to change all worlds. Racism is evil, and the racist must be cast into the outer darkness, whereas sexual sin is just brokenness. The same often applies to society at large. The gross injustices and evils that are systemically present in our society, and often promoted by a bipartisan leadership class, are often seen as merely regrettable elements of an otherwise great society whose continuation should never have been put at risk. We are not willing, and wokeness. Like so many others, much of this played out on social media, especially X. This conflict is the context of his arguments. I wrote an entire long-form newsletter devoted to how we need to be careful about how online disputes and critiques can affect us. I highly recommend reading it. These disputes not only affect us psychologically, they also affect our intellectual positions, political positions, the tribes we associate with, etc. Seldom are the results for the better. As someone once told me of the David French-Sohrab Ahmari feud, it turned both of them into worse versions of themselves. They would surely disagree, and you can draw your own conclusions about that, but undoubtedly both of them significantly altered their trajectory after that. The key is that this can happen to us without us even being aware of it. I'm hardly immune here. Conflict is a part of life. Men don't run away from conflict and even initiate it when called for. I certainly get in debates on X all the time, but I also try hard to avoid getting into these kinds of feuds. I very frequently let things pass without commenting on them or responding to them. I often adopt a posture of de-escalation. When I do disagree with someone, I try to focus on the substantive issue and look for positive things I can say about the person. While there are people who aren't going to like me, I'd rather make friends than enemies, especially gratuitous enemies. And the enemies, or people I do strongly critique, I try to make sure are big-time people for whom public criticism comes with the territory. For the people involved in this feud, or any similar online feud, I'd strongly encourage them to try to end it by pursuing reconciliation. Reach out, have an off-the-record meeting in an undisclosed location, clear the air, bury the hatchet, come to a working arrangement going forward, and move on. Maybe it won't happen. Maybe there are conflicting goals or such fundamental differences that it makes reconciliation impossible. But I think reconciliation is worth pursuing. Have you ever noticed that many alpha male types often, after a very public conflict with someone, get it settled and move on? Sometimes they even strangely end up as friends. Republican megadonor Paul Singer was a never-Trumper in 2016. I sat at a gala and personally listened to him say that neither Trump or Clinton were the right choice. But after Trump won, Singer went to Trump and made up with him. Why? Because he's a smart, tough businessman who deals in reality. He didn't let his pride marginalize him inside of a Trump administration. Similarly, we just watched Trump and Chuck Schumer getting along at the Al Smith dinner in New York. That doesn't mean Singer and Schumer are capitulating to everything Trump wants. They are going to keep fighting for what they want. But they see the value in not letting feuds compromise that. The higher you go in society, the more likely people are to end feuds and work productively with, and even be somewhat friendly with, people on the other side, even those with whom they might have even just have had a knockdown, drag-out fight. Reconciliation isn't a sign of weakness or admitting the other person was right. It isn't always possible, but it's something we should pursue and be open to. It's what I'd encourage people to seek in this case.
Right, so intelligent people are more likely to seek win-win solutions. And the less intelligent you get, the more suspicious people are, the more self-destructive they are, the more likely they are to pursue pointless vendettas. Right, the wise man, right, doesn't get into a bunch of unnecessary feuds.
That's not fair. Now, okay, Matt, I've got guru clips for you. The meat and veg of this podcast, right? Now, this is an area of the online discourse here that we rarely venture into, the manosphere, right? I mean, we've been around there. The ideas seep through. We covered Pearl. You remember Pearl when she appeared with trigonometry? That's on the Patreon for people who would like to see that. But yeah, so Aella, I think it is. You familiar with our online sex worker / rationalist person?
Yes, an interesting character. She's she's neurologically divergent, I think, is part of her brain. Isn't she somewhat autistic?
Yes, I believe she does identify as that, and was raised in a fundamentalist home, and then became like an escort and advocates for sex work and whatnot, but is also a part of the rationalist community, running big surveys on sexuality and whatnot. So she went on one of these talk shows or online channels where, I don't know if you've seen them, where like they get a panel of women, usually like young women, many with OnlyFans accounts, and they kind of question them. It's usually like, you know, a religious conservative man trying to point out the contradictions in their worldview, right? This is
a standard format where they take a group of.
Yeah, it's a popular format. I think Fresh and Fit are part of the people who do it. This particular one, I forget the name of the show, but I mean, we're not advertising. Right? It'll be in the show links if you want to see. I think it's called Whatever or something like that. But anyway, so this is what they do. The normal format is load of young women get asked like critical questions by the host and be made to look stupid. Right? That's the typical format. So Aella was on. It's like 8 hours or something. It's a live stream kind of thing. But there's an exchange that happened between her and this conservative commentator. He actually looks exactly like Jonathan Pajot. It could be Jonathan Pajot in different lighting. They're very similar kind of guys. And yes, this guy is a conservative Christian. But they had this exchange about science and research and methodology. And it got a lot of attention online. So let me play. I've got 2 clips, Matt. Here's the first one for you to listen to of that exchange.
Tell me how we can have science absent a control for an experiment. All experiment by itself is literally inferring that there's controls, or we couldn't have an experiment.
Okay, let's think of a slightly simpler example. Let's say I want to see if there's a correlation between height and weight in a population. How would you propose that we test this?
Between height and weight? I don't know. You tell me.
Well, I told you my strategy for the last one. Can you tell me your strategy for this one?
Why would it matter what my strategy is?
Just so that I know how you're thinking about this.
I don't know. I mean, I have no idea.
I know that it is like, you like to put me on the defensive by asking a lot of questions, and then you won't answer questions because that would put you on the defensive.
I don't know how I would conduct such a study. Why would that matter?
Well, just think, do we have a whole bunch of people, and we're trying to see...
Like, literally, what would the relevancy be, regardless of how I answered, right? So whether or not
well, how you do
it would have the addition of controls.
I'm just curious how you would test to see if there's a correlation between height and weight. Just how would you do the science? What's your strategy?
I have no idea. I've never thought about it.
All right, so let's start it off with him making some points, sort of blustery points. To do science, you have to do experiments. You always need to control. And then Aella returns with this very simple, I thought, question about how to measure an association between height and weight. But he's not biting Chris. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, so this was in the context of like Aella has this massive data set which she collected from like online. Her account is quite popular, so she put a survey out online and collected like, I think it's 800,000 or something responses about, sexuality and sexual interest that people have, right? And she says it's the biggest database ever collected about, this kind of question. But the guy, Andrew Wilson, is saying, well, it's useless because it's it's not a representative sample, right? It's skewed towards online younger people that follow Aella, right?
That's fair. But
yeah, that is a legitimate...
It's also not an experiment, is he was saying, I guess.
Yes, and she has faced this criticism before, and she didn't have great answers initially. She, wasn't particularly statistically competent or methodologically competent, but she's got better. And she kind of acknowledges really, that it's not representative, but it's basically saying, if you look at the other databases that people use to draw conclusions from, they all have their own limitations, right? And you can do various things, right, to try and adjust for the non-representative of your sample. But she's also arguing that if you find these patterns in this data set, you could look at them in general population samples or this kind of thing, right? So she is not completely naive, right, about the limitations of her data set. She's able to answer questions about them. She's faced questions like this a lot, right? She has a blog where she's going through these kind of questions. So her response to Andrew Wilson is very reasonable, right? She's trying to just get him to think through, if you wanted to look at height and weight in a population, how might you examine that, right? Because as you might infer there, Matt, like if you didn't have a representative sample, but you wanted to look at the relationship between weight and height, you could still collect a non-representative sample, and you would likely be able to, just collect 2 measurements, right? And say, oh, there is indeed a correlation. And maybe if you had a very specific sample, you had sumo wrestlers, but still, there is a correlation in sumo wrestlers between height and weight. Yeah. So she's making a very basic point, but obviously he wants to, I don't even think he understands how he would do it, but he's trying to avoid saying anything, that will make him look silly.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, because what he said at the beginning does sound silly, right? Because he was totally dismissing any kind of like survey work because it's not experiments. So all science is experiments, Chris, and that's the end of the story, which is a childish kind of view. Her data sets are not representative, but we very seldom get representative data sets, even supposedly representative data sets. Like, I routinely work with these population surveys where they do their best. It costs like $1 million to employ a whole bunch of people who work in caddy telephone centers, calling people up on random digit dialing and stuff like that, and trying to get a random sample of a given population. But Chris, maybe you can tell me, can you think of any reasons why that is or isn't perfectly representative?
Wait, say it again?
So a bunch of people calling up potential participants, random digit dialing, calling their mobile phones or their landlines or whatever.
But why that would be representative?
Would it be representative?
It's random, right? So like you're not weighting it for the relative population densities, like male, female, like I suppose if you did a random enough sample at a big enough size, you must start to approach the general population.
You're missing the key. You're missing the key limitation.
People who have phones, people who answer their phones.
Yeah, and also people who agree to do a survey.
Oh, right. Well, there's lots of... Yeah, there's too many, Matt.
That's right. I know, it's not fair. It's not fair. I had a specific answer in mind, but all the things you said were true too. But yeah, I mean, that's just an example, right? That's us. You got $1 million in your pocket. you're trying your best to get a representative sample, and it's still kind of impossible. You'll never have a perfectly representative sample. So, it's nice to have them. It's nice to have as wide a sample as possible, but the perfect representative samples don't exist in the social sciences in practical terms in most of the time. So, it's a cross-sectional data that isn't representative, as long as you keep the scope or the recruitment bias in mind, is generally perfectly fine.
Yeah. In any case, like this isn't their first exchange. They've been going back and forth, and Andrew seems to be like caught up, like, that science requires controls, right? Experiments require control, but he's ignoring that there are other ways that you examine things in science rather than controlled experiments. And the nature of control in experiments is also a topic that's more complicated, but it goes on, Matt. And if you thought that maybe he was making like a valid point but just expressing it badly, listen to this second part.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there are ways to do this. There's statistical things we can run. Like we make a chart, X and Y axis. It's a chart. If you would like to call one of the axes a control, we can put that word on it if that makes you happy.
So the point is, nobody enjoys it when others are talking down to you, right? And so these conservative influencers, these Christian influencers who try to make sex workers look stupid, it's not a winning strategy. Right, it just makes you look like an idiot. People resent it when you talk down to them.
What else would it be?
The x-axis. It's the x and y axis. It's like you plot the data on a graph. This is just the way that it works.
And why are we doing that though?
Well, I'll explain.
For what? Because we're controlling for what?
We're not controlling for anything. We're testing to see if there's a correlation. Do you know what correlations are?
So we're controlling for correlate.
We're running a calculation on the. Do you know what a correlation is?
Yes.
Okay. Can you tell me what, just to make sure that you understand?
What a correlate is?
What a correlation is. Like, how's a correlation calculated?
Something that could be loosely or vaguely or non-vaguely associated with some other property.
Very close, yes. It helps tell you how much you can predict one variable by knowledge of the other variable. So, for example, if we want to check the correlation between height and weight.
I don't care about a monologue. I'm asking how it's not a control.
Your question makes no sense. I can explain to you how correlations work. I can explain to you key values.
I don't care about how correlations work. I'm asking about controls, not correlation.
Controls are relevant for certain types of questions.
Perhaps they are.
I'm trying to say controls are not
controls right now. And if you say,
I think you.
Okay, I have a graph and it divides it in half. And it's putting this half over here, this half over there. You have now introduced a way to control what your experiment's going to be.
I can continue. So if we have a graph.
Dear, this is gold, isn't it? So this is him attempting to kind of own Aella in terms of show her up, because he knows what science is, and he's proved that she's not doing anything about science because of whatever. But actually, he's very unclear about even what a correlation is, and even what a XY plot is.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people empathize with Aella's response, right? Which is like, no, you're confused. This doesn't. What your question doesn't make sense. You're mixing.
I mean, what do you do with that when you're trying to explain a correlation to someone and they go, "I don't care about that, but where's the control?" One step at a time. Come on.
Yeah, so this is. I think in part the reason this became so catchy online is that it's the format of the show is that it's these red-pilled conservative men showing up how illogical and the contradictions in the views of these airheaded women. But in this occasion, it instead is like a conservative Christian who knows absolutely nothing, not even the basic things about like science and statistics, displaying it for the world, but talking in a way as if an idiot.
That's right, in that arrogant, blustery tone. Yeah, I think everyone is with Aella on this one.
Yep. All right, a little bit more here from Renn. He talks about the vibe shift and the decline of double standards. So he says the rehiring of a controversial DOGE staffer reflects America's changing approach to cancel culture. So Marco Alez, 25-year-old DOGE staffer, had posted things like normalize Indian hate on X. He resigned. His future employment prospects looked dim, but something unprecedented happened. Vice President J.D. Vance said he should be given a second chance. The president himself agreed. Elon Musk ran a poll. 78% of people voted yes, and Alez got his job back. So nothing shows the much discussed vibe shift more than this incident, right? There's no way this guy would have been rehired during Trump's first term or even rehired into a GOP-aligned organization from 3 years ago. So Darren Beatty was fired from the Trump administration, the first Trump administration early on, because he'd given a speech to Paul Gottfried's association. And because there were some white nationalists at the speech, even though Darren Beatty's speech, Darren Beatty of Revolver fame, Darren Beatty who was constantly on Tucker's talk show, because there were people like Jared Taylor at the speech, Darren Beatty got fired. Now Darren Beatty is back with Trump 2. All right. So all sorts of people who would have been pushed out of Trump 1 are now on board with Trump 2. And this guy has been hired back. And Democrats are horrified, but what about all these parallel situations with leftists? So In 2018, New York Times announced it was hiring Sarah Jeong to be a member of its editorial board, and she'd posted all sorts of hateful tweets about white people. She said, sick how much joy I get out of being cruel to old white men. White people genetically predisposed to burn faster in the sun, thus logically being only fit to live underground like groveling goblins. Right? New York Times stood by her, and they hired her onto their editorial board. And James Gunn had made all sorts of tweets in 2018 suggesting that he loved pedophilia. Right? And they were so loathsome that you can't even, it'd be sickening just to repeat them. Right, Disney fired him, but then quickly reversed course and rehired him. So it used to be that leftists could get away with murder and not lose their job. So the real vibe shift here is that double standards are going away or certainly declining. All right. So we're seeing this in major culture-shaping institutions of our society, including the Supreme Court. Court ruled affirmative action, saying that it is not legal to discriminate against Asians to benefit other races. No discrimination on the basis of race means that. And then we've got the straight discrimination case that the Supreme Court is likely to rule favorably on. So every kid instinctively understands when something is not fair in a way that disadvantages him. It's probably universal. But particularly in American culture, the idea of fairness and fair play is a deep cultural value. Double standards strike Americans as deeply unfair. And in November 2024, the American public made it clear they did not want this continuing. Right? We don't want the cancellation of people on the right and people who are traditional and people on the left getting away with murder. So the collapse of moral norms is one consequence of the loss of the old Protestant elite establishment. So when you have an establishment, that means a society is led by a class of men who act accordingly to an agreed upon code of manners. Certain things are not done. Without an establishment, anything can and will be done in a country where money talks, echoing in a moral vacuum. So without class codes of conduct, without things like white shoe firms, right, that wouldn't hire Jews, that would only hire members of the Protestant elite, right? Without these class codes of conduct, right? Only public scandal constrains, and often not even that. And this erosion of norms and standards goes way beyond the political. So one of the major functions of an upper class is creating and perpetuating a set of traditional standards that carry authority and to which the rest of society aspires. So how do we reproduce a code of manners in today's society? Or do we want to keep having a society that operates on odious practices like doxing? Right? Can we widen the aperture of acceptable opinion? So over the past 10 years of the woke revolution, there was a consistent narrowing of the aperture of dissent. Right? Cisco fired employees for pushing back against Black Lives Matter by saying all lives matter. Today, corporate CEOs can publicly oppose DEI, announce they're getting rid of DEI in their companies. This would not have happened a year ago. So many leaders at many institutions now working with President Trump in a way they would not have done in his first term. So widening the aperture of dissent is usually a good thing. And it certainly benefits Christianity in a negative world. Right, here is another post from Aaron Renn from January 15.
Two internet furors this week shed light on this question. One is yet another round of
And the question is, why do young men flock to online influencers? Headline, Andrew Tate or Panda Express? Which way, young man? What a fast food debate tells us about masculinity, social class, and spiritual boomerism.
Controversy over Andrew Tate after he appeared on a big podcast. Ben Shapiro provides some background on this if you are interested, but in brief, Tate is an extremely popular but very toxic influencer accused of sex trafficking in Romania. A large number of pastors and others were outraged about Tate, which of course they should be. The second was a debate over whether young people, implicitly young men, should lean into working in service class jobs. This was triggered when Chris Rufo suggested young people should get a job at Panda Express, where they can make $70K as an assistant manager and have a career path to store manager making $100K. The Rufo Panda Express furor illuminates a huge range of complex and interrelated issues that are often overlooked in the simplistic debates over matters like whether to work at Panda Express. It even sheds some light on the appeal of Andrew Tate. Should frustrated young people just take a job at Panda Express? There was a major online rift on this point, interestingly within the online new right dissident right crowd. I always love it when controversies divide people in unexpected ways. It exposes fault lines we didn't know were there. In this case, the Rufo side basically argued that young men are entitled and lazy. They want to sit back and complain and demand high status and high-paying positions be handed to them on a plate as a matter of entitlement. The other side accused Rufo and company of promoting the proletarization of young men, especially white men. I don't have a comprehensive, integrated answer to this myself, but there are a wide range of considerations that illuminate why debates like this have been such a huge part of culture and politics. 1. Spiritual boomerism. The Chris Rufo position is an example of what Stephen Wolf called spiritual boomerism.
On Thursday to deliver a message.
This is boomerism.
You're in charge of your departments, not Elon Musk. According to 2 administration officials, Trump told top members of his administration that Musk was empowered to make recommendations to the departments, but not to issue unilateral decisions on staffing and policy. Musk was also in the room. Francesca, how much is this about all this legal stuff that they're fending off at this point?
It's both, and you had already seen cabinet members come out and push back on this 5 things email and even tell their employees that they didn't originally have to do that. Then there's also the issue, as you bring up, of the legal battles. The president had said in his joint address to Congress that Elon Musk was the head of DOGE, which ran counter to some of the arguments that the White House had been making, because he's not Senate confirmed. He is just a special advisor, special government employee, excuse me, the White House has said, which is a significant difference into whether or not he can tell employees that they have to go. But you heard the president again today saying, go with a scalpel. We are not necessarily going to be cutting huge categories of people moving forward.
Yeah, and he talked about that to these federal agencies. We don't want to keep good people. We don't want to be cutting them, and let's be more precise about how we're doing this. Now, while that's all playing out, over on the House side today, they were talking about censuring, and they did, Congressman Al Green for the disruption we saw the other.
Okay, I love this concept of spiritual boomerism, essentially talking down to people and waving your finger at them, and nobody likes it.
The state of mind and style, whether or not held by someone of that specific generation. It is very familiar to anyone who grew up in an evangelical church or men's ministry. Spiritual boomerism is the philosophy that underlies every hectoring, man-up lecture delivered by some traditional authority. One definition of the spiritual boomer style: a person, typically a man, who has achieved high status, sharp success, home ownership, secure retirement.
I like the House leader, Mike Johnson. All right, I enjoyed his facial expressions during Donald Trump's effective State of the Union. When I just look at him, he seems relaxed. He seems happy. I just get a good vibe from the guy. Right. I'm a big Mike Johnson fan.
Marriage, speaking down from his lofty heights towards those who don't have them and saying something like, you just need to do what I did when I was your age. Or, you just need to stop complaining, get to work, and pull yourself up by your bootstraps. People appeal to spiritual boomerism because it contains elements of truth. If you want to succeed, you actually do have to work and work hard. Everybody has to pay their dues. You're not entitled to success. Every generation has to earn it all over again. A lot of young men do need something of a kick in the pants. Having a job is much better than not having one. Previous generations were willing to do what it took. Think about the Jodes migrating to California in The Grapes of Wrath, in ways many young people today aren't. However, spiritual boomerism lacks empathy. It doesn't have skin in the games of the people being talked to. It isn't cheering them on and genuinely hoping that they succeed. It fails to acknowledge the role that good luck played in the success of the people delivering the lectures. It doesn't truly wrestle with the changed circumstances and difficulties facing young people today. It doesn't realize that the old success scripts don't work in the same way they used to. It doesn't give a practical roadmap to achieving real success. That's what online influencers provide. When he was emerging as a guide to young men, Jordan Peterson used to challenge them. Clean your room, bucko, or stand up straight with your shoulders back. But he also made sure young men saw that he cared about them, that he understood their pain, that he was on their side. He didn't just view them as the problem, but as people who mattered in their own right, people whose hopes, dreams, plans, and aspirations mattered too. Rod Dreher wrote about Peterson after an incident in which a young, disturbed man at one of his events rushed the stage looking for help. I was really moved by the way Peterson handled himself here. Moved, but not surprised. Devoting hours to hearing him talk really did reveal to me why he has such a following, especially among lost young men. Whatever flaws Peterson has, he leaves no doubt that he really cares about the people he's trying to reach. Online influencers also give a practical roadmap to getting somewhere. Rufo's original tweet suggested someone who stays to build a career at Panda Express. Online influencers would talk about how you can use a boring job at Panda Express or elsewhere as a source of 9-to-5 income while you work on self-improvement, your side hustle, or launching a business. They'd probably also highlight how to use the 9-to-5 to gain skills that are transferable to running a business. They might start with Panda Express, but they wouldn't end there. They would talk about how no matter how low you are now, you can rise and become a champion. Rufo himself did later talk about how he used low-wage work to help him produce his first film, but it got much less play than the original tweet. Some of this is a classic self-help advice shtick, or even a predatory grift, as with Tate's Hustler University, where the assignments were to post Tate video clips on TikTok. But there's a way this can be done legitimately as well. Whatever truth it contains, Spiritual Boomerism is a proven loser in actually getting young people to follow its advice. Few people respond positively to finger-wagging. 2. Spiritual Boomerism is directed at white men only. While this debate was mostly talking about young people in general, it's clear that the people being talked about are young white men. They are overwhelmingly the target of this kind of rhetoric, and they can see it. Again, we've seen in the evangelical church, where men are told to man up, but women are told to remember they are daughters of king. It's similar in the broader world. There's endless rhetoric, many programs, and big money devoted to encouraging women and minorities to elevate their sights, to go to college or grad school, to become one of the women in STEM. The talent and potential of immigrants are endlessly extolled. It's only young white men who get these sort of lectures. And it would be interesting to see if the people talking about these kinds of jobs would be willing to qualify their advice to specifically direct it to young women or the lower income minorities. In my experience, even conservatives only do this indirectly, such as by talking about the culture of poverty. But it's notable that in this logic, a young inner-city black man who fails to exhibit what they call bourgeois values is in essence a victim of culture, an outside force he didn't create and isn't responsible for. People are willing to admit to the role of outside forces and structures in shaping the outcomes of women and minorities in ways that they are not willing to do for young white men. 3. Social class is an important reality. Yes, money matters. You need it for a house, for marriage prospects, for stability. But in today's America, social status also matters. Its importance has only gone up in recent decades. Inequality and divergence have been defining features of our era. As economist Tyler Cowen put it, average is over. This has produced a two-tier environment in which the top 20-25% of society is doing very well, but the bottom 75-80% is struggling not just economically, but personally and socially. This has bled through into geography. Charles Murray has talked about how America's elite have concentrated into monolithically upscale super zips. Some regions like Nashville are boomtowns, while others like Flint are mired in decline and struggles. Back in 1990, economist Robert Reich labeled this the secession of the successful. In a world increasingly resembling a barbell distribution of winners and losers, it's critical to end up in the winning group. Taking a job at Panda Express puts you at high risk of being socially grouped with the losers. For example, being the store manager at Panda Express might make you marriageable, but marriageable to whom? A man or woman to some extent in this position will be largely frozen out of marriage to someone with a college degree. Your marriage pool gets reduced to those without degrees. And if you do have a degree and are working at a Panda Express, you are still going to be seen as a loser by a lot of women, no matter how much money you make, maybe even if you own the franchise. There are also career implications. If you have a job at Panda Express on your resume after college graduation age, this will be a huge black mark in attempting to get any white-collar or higher status job in the future. Retail is actually the one industry where this might not fully be the case, as retailers put a high premium on store experience in hiring corporate employees. I'm not sure how this applies to the quick-serve restaurant sector, however. Also, the kind of middle-class neighborhood in which one could afford to buy a home, off an income of $80,000, $100,000 is not what it used to be. As documented by scholars as diverse as Robert Putnam and Charles Murray, middle and working class communities are characterized by pervasive social dysfunctions, such as unstable marriages, out-of-wedlock births, drugs, etc. The main reason to seek to live in a super zip today is to isolate yourself and your children from this kind of dysfunction. And again, if you don't have a college degree and work in the service sector, this is your dating and marriage pool. The type of small-town environment I grew up in isn't what it was then. Even if economically it is objectively more prosperous, socially it is a very different matter. Let's be clear, most Americans won't get college degrees. They'll work in jobs like retail, manufacturing, and distribution. These are honorable jobs that keep our society running. Working at Panda Express is dignified work. But let's not pretend that there aren't profound, long-term implications of ending up working at Panda Express compared to white-collar employment. It's completely understandable why someone would be hesitant to commit to a choice that has a high risk of permanently miring them outside of the upper middle class, and everything that comes along with that. Conservatives who urge men to skip college, go into the trades, move to a small town, or other such choices rarely reckon with or disclose the real implications of those choices. 4. Downward mobility. It's difficult and painful to go backwards in life. Deflating your lifestyle or lowering your social status is very unpleasant. Boomers did very well compared to their greatest generation parents. Lots of people raised in Boomer or Generation X homes got to experience the fruits of their parents' upward mobility. It's completely understandable why someone raised in an upper middle class or solidly middle class environment would loathe the idea of downward social mobility. That's a bitter pill to swallow. Downward mobility is a reality of life. There's something to the idea of shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations, but it's understandable why people would hate that or be in denial over it. Failing to show basic sympathy for why people would feel this way is another form of spiritual boomerism. This is one of the outworkings of the dysfunctions of our society. Downward social mobility, the key word being social, not just economic, is a feature of today's America. Not only should we be aware that people are experiencing downward mobility, we should be aspiring for them to have upward mobility. The American dream isn't just about your kids retracing your steps. It's about them reaching heights you never could. As John Adams famously wrote, "The science of government it is my duty to study, more than all other sciences. The arts of legislation and administration and negotiation ought to take the place of, indeed exclude in a manner, all other arts. I must study politics and war, that our sons may have liberty to study mathematics and philosophy. Our sons ought to study mathematics and philosophy, geography, natural history, and naval architecture, navigation, commerce, and agriculture in order to give their children a right to study painting, poetry, music, architecture, statuary, tapestry, and porcelain. This is missing from spiritual boomerism, which at best wants new generations to retrace the same path as their own. We ought to be doing everything possible to elevate our people and see it as a failure on our part if we can't push the next generation to greater heights than we achieved. I want to see Generation Z soar, not have to struggle for years to put in place a basic foundation on which to build a life. Again, we have to deal with reality. And for some people, that's going to mean service or blue-collar work. But we should at least be aspiring for people to reach great heights. There's no sense of this aspiration for the next generation to have it better in spiritual boomerism. Andrew Beck talked about this point as well, highlighting not just the social and economic aspects, but the spiritual ones of seeking higher purpose. What is missing from this job discourse is a hard truth. Young men in the West want purpose and belonging more than anything else. a reason to work and live. They are not bemoaning purely a lack of possessions and absence of comforts, but of zeal. The aversion to menial, purposeless work for the sake of a modern middle-class lifestyle has been trending upward since the early 2000s. Note, among progressive women as well as conservative men, ed. It is perhaps why the elder generation, the largest generation ever, has spent so much energy trying to supplement the Western workforce with men from less developed societies who strive and sacrifice greatly to obtain a slightly elevated standard of living. That elder generation worries that no one will maintain what was built by their fathers, who sacrificed so much to get to where their children could be at ease and enjoy the spoils. But a large cohort of men from these younger generations wish to build upon that foundation and ascend higher than their forebears. What success means for a young Western man, however, is the freedom to do something they care about, something they can pursue and sacrifice for, to be zealous. Gaining independence gives them bandwidth to seek this path of ascension. It is a desire for spiritual fulfillment they act upon, not one for material possessions. We must address this vacuum of zeal in our work and pay more heed to those desires of spiritual fulfillment in our men. Part of being a man is to face the world as it is, rather than as we'd like it to be. Sometimes we do have to suck it up and take a terrible job we hate. Sometimes we don't have, and may never have, the opportunity to pursue higher purposes. But we should at least recognize the goodness and legitimacy of having the desire for those things. 5. Changing generational preferences. Lots of people operate on the assumption that younger generations have, or should have, the same preferences as their own. But every generation has a different set of preferences, and it's not all bad for them to pursue theirs. Let's remember, the boomers were very different from their own parents. And the preferences of the boomer generation massively reshaped society. We should expect that this process is only going to continue. I will give one example. Young people seem to put much more stress on having schedule flexibility than having a steady job. I talked to a consultant who did interviews of employers and residents in an industrial city. Owners of manufacturing companies there said that it was difficult to recruit young workers. This included companies with excellent pay and benefits. One of the firms was a unionized manufacturer with pay of around $90,000 a year. But the young people in that community don't want to work in a factory, and they don't want to be tied down to a clock-punching schedule. Their preference is to drive for Uber or DoorDash, where they can make money on their schedule. That sounds nuts to me, but who am I to tell them how they should live their lives? If they are working and paying their bills, do I really have standing to tell them to take that factory job? The idea of having some autonomy and a gig that allows you to make cash, but also the schedule flexibility to be working on your own business or creative endeavor, can actually make a lot of sense. Maybe they'd actually rather deliver for Panda Express than manage it. Older generations can have a perspective on the choices younger people make, but we have to be willing to understand, acknowledge, and respect their perspectives and preferences as well. Guys like Tate or others of his ilk are tapped into young people's preferences and what they want to hear. That's why there are so many popular hustle bro podcasts. I've heard my Uber drivers listening to them. It responds to the cultural orientation of this younger audience. 6. The cultural contradictions of immigration restrictionism. It tends to be dissident, right types who reject the idea of working at Panda Express. Yet this is the group that is most hostile to immigration and supports mass deportations. In this world, native-born Americans, including white men, would have to be doing a lot of the low-prestige, lower-wage jobs currently performed by immigrants. And I'm not just talking about assistant manager. We're talking manning the deep fryer. Now, in a zero-immigration environment, many of these jobs would simply disappear. Much of the vast array of personal and household services provided to the upper middle class would just go away if there weren't underpaid, exploited immigrants to perform them. But we'd certainly still have a wide range of service jobs. Idaho is one of America's least diverse states. I'm always struck when traveling there how service jobs that are mostly done by immigrants and minorities in other places are done by white people there. For example, when I've stayed at the Monarch Motel in Moscow, the housekeeping staff was made up of young white women who appeared to be college students. It's very interesting to see that many of these are jobs Americans will do in the right circumstances. At the same time, if you want to stop immigration, Americans are going to have to do them. These people have not reckoned with the full implications of a hard restrictionist position on immigration. From Panda Express to Andrew Tate, there's a path from spiritual boomerism to the rise of men's influencers like Tate, just as there's a path from society's unwillingness to address legitimate populist concerns around immigration, trade, and wars to populist political eruptions. As I said in my recent podcast with Matthew Continetti, I see populism as a societal warning indicator, like the oil light in your car. If the oil light comes on, you've got a problem you need to fix. If you don't fix it, you're going to end up with a much more serious and expensive problem. The populist solutions may not be the right ones, but the problems are real. There's a similar effect at work in the men's influencer space. The rise of these people is telling us something is wrong in how society and its institutions relate to young men. But there has not been any correction, so things progress towards the toxic. It's important to reject the simplistic narratives of spiritual boomerism and engage more seriously on these issues in ways that take account of the truth that's in those narratives, but also recognize the complexities of life and society today, and ways that have a sense of empathy and genuine concern for the young people in our society.
Okay, that's Aaron Renn, a thoughtful Christian commentator, says that Christians now have to operate in a negative space. This was hilarious.
Playbook this morning, March 6th, detailing a grim situation, according to Playbook, in a court filing just yesterday, saying that Hunter Biden has struggled to sell his paintings in recent months, moving only one painting in the past 14 months, compared with 27 in the prior 2 or 3 years. Now, isn't that funny that he could sell 27 of those ridiculous paintings when his father was the president and possibly running for re-election, and as soon as that changed, he can't sell another one? I don't understand it. I mean, the art is still great.
Vincent van Gogh, I believe, sold 2 paintings in his lifetime. Emily Dickinson published only 3 poems in her lifetime. Sometimes the great artists of our era go unrecognized, or perhaps they are momentarily recognized due to some fluke in the
but Emily
marketplace.
Dickinson didn't require a federal pardon, so I'm sort of he also is asking a judge to dismiss a case that he brought against someone for claiming that the laptop was real. He's in some dire legal straits, but he really ought to probably find a different PR person, because the American public would like him to go away.
He can't pay a PR person. Obviously,
he has no money.
PR people cost.
Well, where's all the money? Where's all the money that he made as a consultant? This is.
I'm fascinated by the art.
Well,
art has always been the story for me. If Biden is elected president in 2020, all of a sudden, a new artist appears on the scene. Hunter Biden, with these glass acrylic sculpture things that are abstract, and it's remarkable. And he's selling all these artworks. No one knows why. Why is he selling these artworks? Could it be that his father is the president in the United States and the family business is trading money for access? I don't know.
I don't find Hunter Biden impressive in any way, shape, or form, except for this. This was a genius play, right? He really did innovate a method of selling influence and access and that kind of thing that happens around presidents and has always happened around presidents, where friends of the president want to ensure his economic security, both during and after the time that they're in office, and do things like sell them the house for $1. Nixon had presidents who are not themselves wealthy have these kitchen cabinets and people who kind of arrange for their financial security. And this, I think, was probably that kind of thing. But it was provided this hilarious cover with the aesthetic gifts of the person that we really only knew either to have a crack pipe in his mouth from the photo off the laptop, or shaking down Chinese businessmen with his friends Tony and who was the other guy, and his uncle. And so he had figured out a kind of liquid, illiquid method of making himself an asset that wasn't just a business hire. That's why it was so clever.
I think it's cleverer than that, because
Cleverer than that. There's our new slogan.
Yeah, I don't think the art is that bad. I think it's like kind of skillful and very varied in like style. I also don't think he did any of it. That's my.
That is clever.
Okay, that's
Milli Vanilli. Yes,
Yeah.
Milli Vanilli.
Yeah.
Well, it's the workshop. It's the Hunter
Yes.
Biden factory where
Yes,
his
right.
minions actually create his conceptions into reality.
Yeah. Well, or what we call the School of Biden.
The School of Biden.
Yeah, because of course, there was the School of Rembrandt. When you had these great artists who were city artists, in the late Renaissance and in the early modern period, who had more commissions than they knew what to do with, they would have students execute works of art in their style, and those works of art over time have gone through the process of being authenticated either as a work of Rembrandt.
He's more
or
than
as a work-
Salvador Dali, right? He signs a blank canvas and lets somebody else just
Yeah, or
paint it
tapes a
himself.
banana to the canvas. There was that great $6 million work of art, the tape banana. But I think this is a version of something that happened in the 1980s until it came to a screeching halt with the defenestration and the humiliation of Speaker of the House Jim Wright, who his method of enriching himself in office without seeming to enrich himself in office was to publish a ghostwritten book and then have people buy thousands of copies of the book. Then he publish it with a reputable publishing house and then collect the royalties off the book. And then when it became clear how transactional this was, Wright's career was over. He was one of the three most powerful men in Washington.
There are many different varieties of graft in the storied history of the United States of America. Possibly you could create your own cryptocurrency, say, on the eve of becoming the 47th president of the United States and launching a crypto reserve where the
For example,
where the crypto czar happens to be heavily invested in several of the currencies in the reserve.
Yes.
The possibilities are endless in America.
Interestingly enough, it was, of course, Andrew Jackson, the supposed populist precursor to Donald Trump.
Driving this wedge between the conservatives I knew, who were in the Beltway, like I was, and the conservative grassroots around the country.
So Matthew Continetti, the bloke on the right here, he wrote a pretty fair history of American conservatism. Matthew Continetti is very much in the mode of National Review and Commentary magazine, but he's quite fair to Pat Buchanan and to people like Steve Saylor in this book.
Country who clearly were very unhappy with the way that Republican politicians and conservative intellectuals were dealing with the challenges of the moment.
Were you talking about mostly the Tea Party here?
Yeah, it was the Tea Party era. It was the Romney election, which went very badly for Romney and very quickly went badly for him. And I recognize that I did have some resources. Coming into conservative journalism, as I did in 2003 as a graduate from college, I found that the best way to kind of learn my trade was to read the back issues of magazines. I was a journalist. I was working at the Weekly Standard magazine at the time, and so I would just go through the back issues.
Right, that's how I learned America. I burrowed into the Pacific Union College library and went through all the back issues of Life magazine, first of all, Reader's Digest, then Life magazine, then Time magazine, then Newsweek, then Sports Illustrated.
Issues of the Weekly Standard to kind of see how the writers I admired wrote their pieces. How did they settle on topics? How did they structure an article? Who were they referencing in their pieces? And so by the time I became interested in the history of the right in 2012, I had already read through the Weekly Standard. I had read many back issues of National Review. I had read columns collections of columns by authors like George Will. So I kind of had a backing. And then when I began my research, consciously after 2012, I then kind of used that backing as a base and then read more. So I have read a lot in the subject. I won't say I've read every single George Will column, but I have read all of his books. And I won't say I've read every single Pat Buchanan column, but I have read all of his books. And so
wow,
when you begin building up that kind of library, mental and physical, my wife is always complaining about how many books there are in our house. You can then turn and write a narrative. And that was kind of my goal in writing this book, because you mentioned George Nash, who is someone I greatly admire. readers of his conservative intellectual movement in America since 1972 quickly find that the narrative is somewhat disjointed. It's not exactly a chronological narrative. So in my book, I wanted to have a definite starting point and a finishing point. In the hardcover, which you just showed, the starting point is Warren Harding's inauguration in 1921, and the end point is Biden's inauguration.
Okay, this is a blast
told him
from
from the
Mark
beginning, I said,
Halperin.
Alex, I take it as a given your book is going to be great. This is when I do books, is my philosophy. Book's going to be great. All that matters is always be selling. And the best way to sell is to figure out, reverse engineer, what are you going to promote? And Alex has done a masterclass, which I'm surprised has gotten almost no commentary, but here I am commenting on it. Alex has figured out, like, what's the good Daily Mail story? What's the good Vanity Fair story? And he's parceled them out like he's like Santa
Claus.
Not Santa Claus. I'm thinking of, like, what celebrity does this? Like, you're start with Donald Trump in the Oval Office today during this bill signing, talking about DOGE. Let's start with DOGE. Let's start with number 5, saying this is Donald Trump saying he doesn't want to see good federal workers get axed.
Another thing I think most important for today, I want the cabinet members to keep good people. I don't want to see a big cut where a lot of good people are cut. I want the cabinet members to keep the good people, and the people that aren't doing a good job, that are unreliable, don't show up to work, etc., those people can be cut. So I had a meeting, and I said, I want the cabinet members go first, keep all the people you want, everybody that you need. And it would be better if they were there for 2 years instead of 2 weeks, because in 2 years they'll know the people better. But I want them to do the best job they can. When we have good people, that's precious. That's very important, and we want them to keep the good people. And so we're going to be watching them, and Elon and the group are going to be watching them. And if they can cut, it's better. And if they don't cut, then Elon will do the cutting.
So, as we reported this morning on the program, aka the morning meeting, pressure from cabinet secretaries unhappy with basically working for Musk after they were Senate confirmed and he wasn't, and pressure from Republicans in Congress. Tom Cole on the record with the Washington Post saying it's too much, cutting too much. Alex, have you ever heard the president speak so kindly about good federal workers as he did just now?
It was an interesting moment, especially when you consider that it was about this time last week when Trump had Elon Musk stand up before all his cabinet members in a cabinet meeting, and it really felt like Trump was very much empowering Musk. And for Trump to do this now today, which felt like he was clipping Trump was clipping Musk's wings a little bit. It was surprising. I thought it was pretty notable, to be honest.
Yeah, Kristen, your thoughts on this important day in the Trump-Musk relationship?
You know, I don't think it changes. I think we can say, yes, this was a huge moment and change, but I think it's more of, you know, as this goes along and trucks along, more people are added to the cabinet, the process keeps moving. I think it's just the natural adjustment and progression. And so we can all, you know, the left will say, oh, Elon's doing this unilaterally, make him a villain. But ultimately, you know, that's not his role. His role is to be a disruptor in this process to help things get done that, frankly, Republicans and Democrats have not been able to do for decades. And so, you know, and I kind of go back to even before this, when Elon went to the House GOP conference, I thought that was really smart for him to go and listen to the members, listen to the people who are hearing from their own constituents that there are cuts that are hurting their everyday lives. And the response wasn't too bad, we're cutting anyway. It was, oh, that's really good to know. We're going to go back and adjust. And you know, this is a tech businessman, and business and government do not run the same. This isn't Tesla, right? This isn't X. Elon's not sitting, you know, sleeping in the basement of the Capitol trying to redo this. And so there's going to be some bumps in the road that just institutionally are there. And it's a little bit more complicated than just restarting a business. And so I think it's healthy, and I think it's a progression. And I think we'll see it again and again down the road as it happens. And what I thought was the most telling is how receptive and supportive Elon was in response, not just to the House Republican members who voiced their concerns, but also to the president and what he said today. Elon is the happy warrior that is here to make change and is going along with whatever, you know, the direction that the president puts him in.
Elon kind of gets the joke, right? People sometimes look at him as maybe a little nutty, a little weird, but he gets the joke, which is to adjust. All right, a roller coaster on the tariffs, right? First, the president said they're happening. Then he said they're off on Mexico, but still on Canada. And then he reversed most, but not all of the new tariffs on Mexico and Canada, suspended them. And here's what Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary here in New York today, the New York Economic Club, talking about Trump and tariffs. Please play number 9.
As President Trump has said many times, tariff is his favorite word. I would say the reciprocal is probably his second favorite word. And I think we have to be open to the idea, if you want to be a numbskull like Justin Trudeau and say, oh, we're going to do this, then tariffs are going to go up. But if you want to sit back, have a discussion with the Commerce Department, USTR, they all have my phone number too. I am happy to have a discussion with our foreign counterparts that says that here's what we think you were doing. And Tariffs are the actual easy part. Because we know India does this on U.S. motorcycles. Germany does this on, or EU does this on American cars. That's a quantitative number. But also, what are non-tariff barriers? Apple cannot sell the new iPhone 16 because of local content laws in Indonesia. Are you manipulating your currency? Are you suppressing the value of that? Are you unfairly subsidizing select industries, either via bank lending or suppressing labor markets?
I stayed with it a little longer than I might have because I want to get your impressions of two things simultaneously. Kristen, you first. One is, does any of this tariff back and forth matter in terms of the public, or no one in the public would be paying attention? And what do you think of Scott Bessent as a spokesperson on the economy?
Well, I'll take the latter first. I think he's very smart. And to the people who are, I don't believe that the average American is watching back and forth on tariffs. The average American is going to know, whether the economy is getting better, whether the prices of what they're buying every day, the people in, the car factory workers in Michigan, if they get better jobs. I mean, that's what they're focused on. For the people that do focus on the intricate details of tariffs and stock markets and who are watching CNBC all day, I think Scott Bessent is a trusted voice for them. He's obviously a well-respected subject matter expert. And so when he talks about tariffs and the process, I think he brings a level of confidence that people who are watching this minute by minute to see, that may be either concerned or confused at the different moves being made, he brings a confident voice to that. But I think the average American, at the end of the day, tariffs, it's a very complex thing to understand. It makes me wish that I majored in economics and not politics every day. But they're going to normal people want to know how this affects them. Everything that's happening right now, they will feel it every day when they go shopping and what they do. Alex, you got Uber Eats at the door? Is that what you're looking over there?
No, I was going to do that later.
Okay. Alex, in normal presidency, this kind of flip-flopping I mean, no president would do this, but Donald Trump doesn't care. The same two questions to you. Is there any meaning or negative cost to all this flip-flopping on tariffs? And how do you appraise a month or so in Scott Bessent as a spokesperson for the administration on the economy?
It does feel like there have been some real flashbacks to the early days of the Trump 1 administration, where it does feel like there's some chaos setting in terms of the daily changes, the seeming knee-jerk reaction to whatever the stock market is doing. It does feel like you're starting to feel a bit more chaos seeping through over the last couple of days. As far as Bessent, he's absolutely a good spokesman. He's someone who Trump definitely trusts to go out there and appear on TV and to talk about the stock market. But it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out, because Trump has come out in such strong favor of tariffs. And then when he backs down like this, what does that do? Does it continue to create more and more uncertainty for the stock market going forward?
All right. Again, if you want to be on the conversation, please raise your hand. There's so much to get to. I'm going to have to cool down here. I want to play at this time. This is going to be number 3. Lots of anger on the right and confusion amongst people, maybe in the center, maybe some Democrats also, at Nicole Wallace's comments after the State of the Union, speech regarding DJ and the little boy who was made part of the Secret Service and hugged the head of the service. And she basically said, well, great if he wants to be a cop, but hopefully he's not a cop who commits suicide. As far as I know, when I last checked, she hasn't commented on what she said. MSNBC haven't commented. No one will be surprised that Donald Trump is very familiar with what Nicole Wallace said. And here he is talking about her in that Oval Office bill, executive order signing ceremony number 3, please.
In CNN is MSDNC, which is the worst. And the good news is very few people watch them anymore. They have lost such credibility. And frankly, what Nicole Wallace said, I've never been a fan of hers, and she's not very talented. But I'll tell you, what she said the other day about that young man is disgraceful. She should be forced to resign. And Rachel Maddow should be forced to resign. Nobody watches her anyway. I don't know if it's not possible they pay her as much money as I hear, but certainly she's lost all credibility, both of them. But what they said the other day, they should be forced to resign about that young person who is suffering great.
All right, Alex, do you refuse to play my game with the fake buzzers, or are you willing to play? Here's another question. $25 on the line.
Okay.
What is Nicole Wallace's maiden name? Nicole Wallace's maiden name.
I don't know.
Stop Googling, Kristen.
I used to know it, and I can't remember it.
All right. It's Nicole Devenish. We were looking for Devenish.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Do either of you want to comment on what the president said about Nicole Wallace and Rachel Maddow? Please do if you do.
I think he was too nice. I mean, she's a professional, but she's a human being. I mean, what she said was just totally out of line. And she's a comms person. So she knows what she says. She's done this as a career to frame a message. She knows what she was saying. But even then, people make mistakes and they step on what they're saying. Go out and apologize. The fact that she hasn't done that and hasn't recognized how heartless and cruel her words were really is a testament that Trump has really broken her. I mean, I was shocked. It was upsetting to me as someone who does politics for a living to see someone else who has worked on the same side be so callous. There was just no excuse for it.
Kristen, before Alex comments, let's say Nicole called you and said, "I heard you on two-way because like everyone else, I watched two-way tonight, and I want to set this right." What kind of statement do you think would be appropriate?
It could be I think short. Less is more. She's already said a lot. To come out and just say, let my emotions get the better of me. It was an inappropriate statement. My heart goes out to DJ and his family. It was a heartwarming moment. I apologize for not articulating that. I mean, it could be even just, I'm sorry. Really, it doesn't have to be that complicated.
Yeah. Alex, do you comment either on what he said just then or your sense of the current state of the president and his White House's relationship to the media writ large?
Well, I'll say this, which is that this White House press shop, it's not, and it's a joint digital shop. It's not like a traditional White House press shop. They are extremely attuned to whatever anyone says in the mainstream media, and they pay particular attention to what happens on cable networks and networks they deem to be left of center. And they're very adept at grabbing those videos, putting them on Twitter, and blowing them up and really highlighting them. It really feels like a campaign war room more than the traditional White House. Definitely much more than the first Trump White House, definitely more than the Biden White House. It feels like a 24/7 campaign.
And you get official White House statements and tweets that are like most war rooms wouldn't put out because they're so over the top.
Yeah, I believe it's called the 47 Rapid Response Twitter account.
Yeah.
It is 24/7 campaign style stuff. And so this is an example of the kind of thing that the White House is really good at highlighting.
Yeah, it revs up the base, it puts the liberal media on the defensive, and it allows the president to feel wonderful because he loves doing it. So it's a very powerful thing for them. All right, I like to pretend sometimes this is a regular program, so I'm going to do what we call in the business a reset. Our guest tonight, Republican strategist Christian Davidson, Axios writer Alex Eisenstadt, his new book, Revenge, the Inside Story of Trump's Return to Power, during some of the moments in the State of the Union-like speech when no other Democrat seems to have stood, or very few other Democrats. And so he tweeted this today. Jim Barrett, a flight attendant, politely chased me down at Chicago Airport. I think it's called O'Hare or Midway, but that's all right. Sir, I'm a Democrat, but the way the party behaved was embarrassing, made us look heartless. I don't care who is up there. You stand for the boy with cancer. Be more rational and get your act together. Do you guys have the second tweet or just that one? I'll read the second tweet. I don't know if we have the graphic.
Okay, so Paris Hilton apparently has a hit song out called ADHD. And she says, sometimes I want to fight it. Sometimes I praise. Sometimes I cry. I can't deny it. I just keep on trying. I want to crumble. I want to stumble. My mind's always running. Sometimes I feel like crying. Now look at me. I was so down. I never thought I could be. My superpower was right inside. It was ADHD. All right. This is such nonsense. All right. If you have ADHD, you are you're statistically likely to die about 8 years ahead of time, ahead of the national schedule. If you have ADHD, it is devastating for your happiness. It is devastating for your ability to maintain and develop relations with other people. It is devastating for your ability to get married and to be a stable person. It is devastating for your relationships with your family. There's no superpower in being ADHD, right? This just shows that you're ignorant. It's like saying, oh, I got HIV. HIV is my superpower. I got the monkeypox. Monkeypox is my superpower. It's like saying I'm retarded, and being retarded is my superpower. I don't have a left foot. Being without a left foot, that's my superpower. I have narcissistic personality disorder, right? So if you have narcissistic personality disorder, narcissism is not a state, it's a condition, right? It's not a superpower. So the notion that ADHD can be your superpower, you don't have ADHD. My superpower was right inside. My superpower was ADHD. Right, just total nonsense, idiocy, terrible example or advice or guidance for anyone, right? Virtually everyone I know in my 12-step programs has ADHD, and virtually all of them fail to make progress with their crippling, life-threatening addictions until they address the ADHD. So if you have ADHD and you don't address it, which almost always means getting medicated for it, right, your life is crippled. Your ability to make progress is crippled. Your ability to be at ease in the world is crippled. Your ability to make good judgments with your money is crippled. All right, you are going to go on this roller coaster of emotions. You're going to be difficult to be around. You're going to be much more of a curse to society than a blessing. You're not going to make progress. All right, you are not going to be a fountain of goodness as long as you have undiagnosed, unmedicated ADHD.
The second tweet is, he said, I replied that a few of us did stand and clap, and we must be the party that still believes in kindness, decency, and trying to bring people together. So Ro Khanna couldn't join us tonight, but he'll join the morning meeting tomorrow at 9:15 Eastern. Come for that. There's all promos tonight, and reintroducing the guests. It's a little tedious. Alex, do you attach to me? I'll tip my hand. Like, that's not a normal thing most Democrats would do. He basically said, somebody came up to me and said the party needs to shape up, and he agreed. What do you think of the two tweets from Congressman Khanna?
Yeah, there's just so much uncertainty right now within the Democratic ranks about how to approach Trump. And we are, 3 months post-election, and they just don't know how to approach Trump. And you compare it to where we were 8 years ago, and it felt like after Hillary Clinton's loss, Democrats, they kind of knew what direction they wanted to go in. But it doesn't feel now the same way. It feels like they very much are directionless, and that includes in terms of how to handle the theatrics during Trump's speech. They were all over the map on that. And you've seen a lot of disagreement within the party in the days after that. And so it's just another example of how the Democrats are still trying to figure out what direction they want to take here.
Yeah. Kristen, what do you think of what Congressman Khanna did, and how distinctive is it compared to what most of the party's attitude is?
Well, I think if more Democrats take that approach, then I think Republicans need to take mind and start to be worried that they're starting to get their act together. It's shocking to me how it is news that someone would tweet that. It's shocking to me that it's even an issue. And frankly, if I were Senator Alyssa Slotkin, I would be really upset, because I thought for a response, which is very difficult.
Best ever.
Yeah, and I thought she did fine. And her, talking with people, and they were saying, well, no one's really going to watch that response. She was talking to Democrats. If Democrats would listen to what she was saying, and that would be the message to take away. I would be upset if I were her, because no one's talking about that. No one internally in the party is saying, should we be, echoing what she said? They're talking about the fact that they couldn't stand and clap for a 13-year-old boy dying of cancer. I mean, when you get to that point, get yourself in a room, stop worrying about, your DEI metrics and whether you're patriotic enough. Just the bar is really low here. So I think good on the congressman for saying that. If more Democrats start to catch on to that, Republicans should, keep in mind, because it means they're starting to get it together. But as of now, I'm just shocked that more haven't.
Couldn't agree more. All right. Gavin Newsome did 3 things today. I believe 3 things, maybe 2. I keep telling conservatives, I don't know that he's going to run in 28, but he's not as dumb as you think. He's not as liberal as you think. And he's better with people than you think. I'll keep telling you that, because you guys are underestimating him, even though, again, I'm not sure he's going to run. Today, he had Charlie Kirk on the maiden episode of his podcast. Most Democrats would not know how to call Charlie Kirk or not try to get him on their platform, and he did. And here's a little bit of that. Number 19, please.
Now should come out and be like, you know what? The young man who's about to win the state championship in the long jump in female sports, that shouldn't happen. You as the governor should step out and say no.
No, and I appreciate it.
But like, would you do something like that? Would you say no men in female sports?
Well, I think it's an issue of fairness. I completely agree with you on that. So that's easy to call out, the unfairness of that.
Whoa. Okay. For the governor of the People's Republic of California, that's a pretty big deal. Now, we've been trying to figure out how different that is from what he said previously. I said he did 3 things. Let's just do 2 things. He had Charlie Kirk on his podcast, and he took a position on trans athletes in women's sports that seems to be to the right of many in the party. Kristen, what do you think of those 2 things?
Well, I'll be the first to say that, I think I was on this program a few weeks ago saying that Gavin.
Okay, people don't understand how disabling ADHD is. And probably the premier expert on this is a guy named Russell Barkley. Right, here he is.
Is a disorder of executive functioning, and there I talk about the development of the 7 major executive functions that ADHD is interfering with, including, to begin with, self-awareness, which I think of as self-directed attention, inhibition, which is self-restraint, nonverbal working memory, we know it primarily as visual imagery and sensing to the self, and then there's self-speech in the mind, verbal working memory. All of that contributes to the development of emotional self-regulation, as well as self-motivation. And finally, the last EF is planning and problem solving. ADHD seems to interfere with the development of all 7 of those executive functions. And as a result, it's going to interfere with the 4 developmental transitions in what is controlling our behavior. On the left side of the screen, we see what it's like to be, say, a 3-year-old who has very little executive functioning. Over on the right, we're going to be looking at people who are at least 25 to 30 years of age and older. During this time, there is a major transition. Let me get that back again. There's major transitions in what's controlling us. In preschool years, we're controlled by the momentary now and external events. As we mature for another 30 years, we're going to be more and more controlled.
Michael, what's going on, man?
Hey, 40, how you doing?
Good, man. Good to talk to you.
I just thought I'd call in for like 5 minutes, if that's all right.
Sure.
Because I saw you tweeted out that article today about the Panda Express assistant manager position.
Yeah.
So what was your take on that?
I don't have one. I'm kind of I'm in the middle. So I thought that Renn did an excellent job. That for many people it's going to look terrible on your resume, but all work is honorable. I'm in the middle. I don't know. What's your take?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he was kind of in the middle too. I think that I could almost see myself working at Panda Express as an assistant manager. Like if I had my life right now. However, I think he's right that that would not be very good for the dating market. Like you really couldn't go around picking up women with that job at all. You would have to just meet women at work, I guess, or.
Yeah, I mean, the type of woman who'll go out with you and you'll be regarded as a loser. And all sorts, like one of the biggest dreams that men have is freedom. And they often think, oh, if I just work at a Panda Express, like I'll be free from my current responsibilities or my current worries and concerns. But you will be placed in the loser category. I remember I took a semester off largely from college and I went and worked construction. And I remember just being treated like a loser,
Wow.
particularly when I worked on a college campus. And it was an awful feeling, awful feeling.
So unfair, so just not right. But I think he was casting the. You say people might want to work at Panda Express for freedom, but I think he was framing it as the opposite of freedom. Like that's a very steady job where, you have to work 40 hours a week, and I think freedom is supposedly working for Uber or Uber Eats or whatever it is.
Well, people get all sorts of delusions. And so some people who don't understand what would be required at Panda Express may have delusions. And people, the more prestigious your position in society, the easier it is to get canceled. Working at Panda Express is not prestigious. And so you're much less likely to get canceled than if you're a college professor. Also, the United States is a very different country from Australia. So in Australia, there wouldn't be nearly as much denigration of yourself as a loser. Also, if you have a spouse who you're putting through medical school, or you have a spouse, like I know a friend of mine, his wife ran a McDonald's and she supported him as he went through college and went through law school. So yeah, if you have a spouse who's getting a professional education, then you can pull it off briefly. It's like if you're a great athlete and you play community college ball, right? You can do it for 1 year, but it's last chance you really don't want to hang out at a community college.
Yeah, and it's kind of counterintuitive that as that was a good article by I'm not really familiar with that writer at his Substack, but counterintuitively, working this honorable job, which is not glamorous, is actually bad for your resume because then it just says Panda Express on your resume. It's like, that's the end.
Yeah, and it's not just the resume, it's the people that you will associate with, and everything comes easier after you take the first step. So things changed in my life when I got enraptured by working construction because it just seemed so against type for me. And so I dialed back my college for once, but it just puts you on a bad trajectory if you are otherwise headed for a white collar work life.
Exactly. But now you take your life. Imagine if you worked at Panda Express as assistant manager, you could go home and still do the Luke Ford show. It would be no problem.
No, it's not that it would be no problem. There would be problems, that there would be advantages. So George Orwell, I think he wrote a book, Down and Out, in London and Paris. But for the majority of the people, it's going to put you on a track that, if you're highly intelligent, you probably don't want to be on.
True. Unless you're just so into your side hustle, as he says, that you consider your day job like irrelevant. But that's kind of a dangerous approach to life too. Unless you're just happy for the love of whatever your hobby is, and you leave it at that. But if you're really banking on it to become something else, then that becomes a little risky. Yeah.
I just know so many professional people who have dreams of working at a Panda Express, because I know a lot of under owners, and I sponsor a lot of under owners, and they think being a professional is a hassle, and it'd just be so much easier if I ran a fast food chain.
Oh man.
Yeah. It's destructive. But back to you. Any additional thought? I mean, it's better than being unemployed. Like, there are white collar people who couldn't find a job and got a job at a Starbucks, and one guy wrote a book about it, how Starbucks saved his life. So there are people for whom it could be life-saving. It could be a transition. It fits the particular situation.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think what you said is that some people are reluctant to get into a corporate white collar professional job because they have some kind of adolescent idea of themselves as a nonconformist or being against the system. They don't want to tuck their shirt in and wear a button-up shirt, or some idea like that could really be holding them back, perhaps.
Yeah.
But then ironically, if they say, I'm not buying into the system, I'm going to go work at Panda Express, they'll find themselves much more degraded than they would have been otherwise.
Right. So in general, doing what one thinks is right is not nearly as good a guide to life as doing what your parents think is right, and more particularly what your grandparents think is right. And so I don't think many grandparents would tell their grandchild, go work at Panda Express as a full-time thing.
So why is
unless it was for a particular social circle. So it worked for Chris Rufo, and so people tend to think that what worked for them is good for others. And also it's honorable to work, right? It is good for you to work. So rather than staying at home playing video games, most people would be better off working at a Panda Express.
I think he got a little bit dogpiled, maybe unfairly, for that, but it was something funny. And what you just said gives a little context that apparently he himself had that trajectory in his career, but it came off like, why is Chris Rufo telling us to go work at Panda Express as assistant manager?
Yeah, like I'm so in the middle on this, because I venerate work. I think that work for most people is about the healthiest thing that they do for a great deal of time, that you have to put other people's needs before your own if you're going to have any sort of stable job, and that's a really good thing to do. And I also know how delusional young people are. Like, when you're in your teens and your 20s, you have such a dramatic overestimation of your own abilities that it's that compared to that out of touch with reality common vibe for people in their 20s, working at Panda Express by comparison to that seems healthier and saner. But if your parents are decent, like, do what they say. I think if you're smart, most parents would want you to get credentialed and then go on to a job that is has some prestige.
But I think we also there's a presumption of equality in America where you would never think, well, that's an honest job, so you can go on from that to anything. But in fact, no, because now you've identified yourself with the so-called the loser class. but you assume that all work is good and we're all equal. But in fact, there's kind of a subtext to American society that you didn't know about, where it's prestige, it's status, it's what college you went to, or whether you went to college, or the stat. But on the other hand, one more thought, like, I would not take a glamorous sounding job if it didn't pay enough, and then I couldn't even live my life. Like, I'd rather take kind of a lame sounding job, maybe not Panda Express, but just like a boring, lame job, and be able to live a little bit comfortably and go out to dinner if you want, than one of these kind of in the arts or in the media or something adjacent to that.
Yeah, I think it'd be more socially acceptable in Australia, and then there'd be different parts of the country where it'd be more socially acceptable. But in the Northeast, it would not be socially acceptable in particular, because there where you go to school matters so much more than on the West Coast. But the more elite your tendencies, all right, the more weird it would be. So I devote my time to retailing ideas, and there's only a tiny elite audience for this. And so it would be really weird for me to be working at Panda Express and devoting myself to retailing ideas in my spare time.
True. It would be a little bit of cognitive dissonance.
Yeah.
And
and the people that I would meet, and it would be somewhat contradictory.
Yeah. It would be. And, some people are not even aware of their own intelligence, and they might go into a job like that and find themselves quite unpleasantly surprised by, how the real world is.
And it may not be stimulating. I mean, it may really grind you down. And the things that you choose to do, that many things that are perfectly legal can just grind you down.
Yes, but then when you get a decent job, then by comparison, you'll be very comfortable. I don't know what it had to do with Andrew Tate, though. I felt like he kind of shoehorned that in there. He never quite. I think I read it.
I think Andrew Tate is an influencer and sells a lifestyle to people, and he's very effective at meeting young people, talking to them with regard to their aspirations.
But where does Andrew Tate stand on Panda Express assistant manager?
Well, Andrew Tate is selling a dream, right? He meets people in their 20s and teens where they're at, and he connects with them on the basis of their aspirations. So I remember listening to this sales seminar by the one sales guy I ever listened to and even bought a few of his products from, and I'm forgetting his name, but his essence was, when you're selling, you're not selling to the middle manager at Panda Express or the person who works at an insurance company. You're selling to his dream of himself, either a rock star, as an athlete, or as a religious leader, or like we all have dreams of who we really are, and Andrew Tate like talks to 100 IQ people on that level. He's able to talk to them on the basis of their dreams.
Yeah, I don't really know what he talks about. I've heard some of his like political opinionating, and I'm not pro Andrew Tate, but I'm not anti. I'm kind of like anti Andrew Tate. Does that sound reasonable?
Sure. I mean, I just find him so off-putting that I don't tend to spend much time with him. But I recognize that a lot of 100 IQ people and below, find him appealing.
Right. Like, I've definitely heard him speak, and I've heard interviews, and he just comes off as like pretty aggressive and like reasonably intelligent, but not particularly coming up with anything too interesting. But I just feel like when I hear people bellyache about Andrew Tate, I just know that is kind of like packaged with a set of other beliefs that I'm not going to like.
Well, he's a pimp, and
right.
I don't think that someone who has a low regard for pimps, that doesn't tell me I'm not going to like them. So if you push me, I'd be much more in the anti-Andrew Tate category.
Yeah. Well, you know what? When you put it that way, I agree. But it's just when people, the way that he's brought up, and people are so kind of focused on him, I don't even understand why. So it just seems like this weird grievance that people have.
And it's important to recognize what are the needs that are met. Like if someone is drinking excessively, or someone who's following Andrew Tate excessively, or using porn excessively, they're all doing those things to meet a particular need. And unless they learn to meet that need in a more healthful fashion, they're not going to give it up. It's a Rorschach's test. It's telling you something about the person, that they have this visceral need, and they found that alcohol or Andrew Tate was the best way to meet this need.
Yeah, I mean, like the Substack article said, it's a warning light that something is wrong, and there's this populist kind of uprising, and so yeah. But good article, 40. I just wanted to call in because it was so timely that I wanted to chat about that real quick, and but yeah, we'll catch up soon.
Okay, sounds good, Michael. Talk to you later, man. Thanks.
All right, thanks. Bye.
Cheers, mate.
Controlled by cognition, by mental representations that we hold privately that have to do with our plans, our goals, our welfare. That transition is also going to be accompanied by another one. In the preschool years, we're controlled mainly by others, especially our parents and teachers. As we grow up, we begin to assume more and more of our self-control, self-regulation, and less influence by others. That's accompanied with a third transition, where we go from being entirely obsessed with the now, and we have little, if any, sense of time, to as we mature, we begin to anticipate futures that lie ahead, and we begin to organize behavior toward those anticipated futures. Finally, all of that, let's go back again, is accompanied by a transition from concern with the immediate reinforcement in the now to increasingly being governed more by delayed gratification, the future consequences that are larger and more important to our welfare. And we know that because ADHD is delaying and disrupting those 7 executive functions, it's also interfering with these transitions that go on across development. So no surprise there. I've talked about all of that before. But let me go further and talk now about brain maturation and this cognitive control of behavior. So here's a diagram that comes from an article back about 16 years ago by Badra. I love the diagram. It's just a picture of the brain, but the brain is progressing in its maturation from the central part of the brain outward toward the frontal lobe. So as this maturation is going on, there is increasing control by the anterior part of the brain. Now, what is going on during this brain maturation? Well, a lot of changes are happening in our behavior. So with maturation, we're first of all going to see that the individual is able to construct and to execute increasingly complex chains of behavior, and chains of behavior that might be organized into even larger hierarchies of goals, plans, tasks, and things that we need to get done. So our behavior is becoming more complex. In addition, we're also beginning to interact further and further away from our home base. Young children are primarily at home, governed at home with their family group. But as we get older, notice that we are beginning to venture out further into space, into our culture, into the geography around us, so that there's this extension across space of our behavior, particularly our complex behavior. Now, as that progresses, as we just talked about, there's an increasing expansion of our behavior across time. We begin to organize toward futures that are further and further away as our brain matures. And then on top of that, we also begin to value delayed outcomes more and more. We're working for those larger goals, as I've already said, that are later in time but are more supportive of our welfare. We're beginning to anticipate, to consider and contemplate and plan for even more abstract goals. Goals like going to college, rather than just getting dressed for school like a child might be doing. So the goals that we are planning are more abstract, and that leads to more complicated behavior, more complex chains and hierarchies of behavior. But we're also beginning to engage in increasingly complex interactions with others, from interacting with our family, mainly tit for tat, to reciprocity, which is kind of I'll do for you what you do for me. And that's taking place within the family and then within our peer groups. And then we start to join larger groups that engage in cooperation, where the group is doing things that no individual could accomplish on their own and sharing in the benefits of that cooperative activity. And then we move on out into the larger social culture, where we are interacting with many people and many different groups as we go about completing our goals. Finally, there's an increasing reliance as the brain matures on cultural products, inventions, like computers, like money, like cars and other forms of transportation. There's many different cultural products that we, through our brain, we are reaching out to incorporate into our life and to use them to accomplish our goals. Now, what's so important about this? It explains why ADHD is so devastating, because ADHD interferes with the progressive development of that frontal lobe, and therefore with the progression, overdevelopment of all of these different dimensions of our behavior, of our social functioning, of our cultural functioning. So now you can see why ADHD isn't just a disorder of attention. It's a disorder of executive functioning, which interferes with self-regulation across time to the future. And it interferes with all of these different dimensional changes going on as we increasingly move forward into the brain with the cognitive control of our behavior. So now we can see why ADHD is linked to so many different domains of impairment, from social functioning and disruption in this domain, to educational functioning, and then employment functioning, and then managing our finances, not to mention things like driving and getting around in our culture. And finally, as I've talked about in other lectures, our health, welfare, and even our mortality. So ADHD is a very serious disorder because it's a disorder of executive functioning, self-regulation across time with attention to our future.
You are not going to believe this, but I have the receipts. Ashley St. Clair just pulled off the most calculated baby trap scam in modern history. And the target, Elon Musk. Yes, that's right, the richest man on the planet. But this isn't just about the money. No, Ashley St. Clair is not your typical classic gold digger. She's a master manipulator. And this wasn't just about securing a billionaire's child support for life, because she wanted power, she wanted access. And I know that for a fact because I used to be one of her best friends. Because let's be real, Elon Musk isn't just your average billionaire. He controls Tesla, he controls SpaceX, and literally the future of AI. And now he's right next to Donald Trump, President Trump. He's the president of the United States right-hand man, if not arguably the most powerful man in the entire world right now. Okay, he's not your average billionaire, guys. He's quirky. He's actually more than just that, and Ashley knew that, and that's why she set her targets on him. So yes, he's inside the Trump administration, and he's quite literally shaping government itself. And also, he owns X, formerly known as Twitter, which is the most powerful social media platform right now on Earth, particularly the case for conservative media. And of course, everyone knows that conservatives were foaming out the mouth, simping for Elon Musk whenever he bought Twitter from Jack Dorsey, which, yes, I was very appreciative of, right? I was banned and then I was brought back thanks to Elon Musk buying the platform. However, I was not going to say that everything Elon Musk did was amazing, because obviously Elon Musk does not live out the conservative lifestyle at all, which we all knew that was not a shocker to anyone. Anyways, Ashley saw all of that power from Elon Musk, right? She saw all of it, and she wanted to play the long game. She wanted a key to that empire. She wanted a direct line into the highest circles of influence, a seat at the table where billionaires and world leaders make decisions. I used to be friends with her, so I saw precisely how she operated, and now I have the messages, I have all of the receipts. I saw the step-by-step game plan where she figured out how to trap, seduce, and lock down the most powerful man on the planet. No, this was not an accident, guys. This was premeditated. This was planned. She set her sights on the ultimate prize: wealth, power, control, access. And now I'm exposing everything. Yeah, buckle up, bitches. It's gonna be a bumpy ride. So this past Valentine's Day, Ashley St. Clair posted a bombshell post on X, and let me show you what it read. Aella lacta est. I don't know what that means. I didn't care to look it up. Anyways, 5 months ago, I welcomed a new baby into the world. Elon Musk is the father, allegedly. I have not previously disclosed this to protect our child's privacy and safety, but in recent days, it has become clear that tabloid media intends to do so regardless of the harm it will cause. I intend to allow our child to grow in a normal and safe environment. For that reason, I ask that the media honor our child's privacy and refrain from invasive reporting. Okay. And of course, you get people, you know, so-called conservatives, which a lot of these people I'm friends with, so I'm not even trying to hate on them. I'm not. But, you know, God bless you and your family. Candace Owens said children should always be off limits. Cernovich, good friend of hers, congratulations. You know, we see so many people that are supposedly for family values, traditional family values, that aren't we supposed to be against single motherhood and raising kids in broken families? And keep in mind that Ashley St. Clair already has another son with a previous baby daddy. So now she has 2 kids, allegedly, with broken families. So why are we congratulating this? You should only reward and say good things about behavior that you want more of. Do we want more single mothers? Absolutely not. Anyways, I digress. By the way, something I want to point out. I love how she tries to claim that now she has, so basically what happened is she and her friends were trying to claim that the crazy evil media was trying to dox her baby, which means disclose the location of her baby, put the baby at harm's way. Obviously, that was fake news, because I still have yet to this very day, and this is weeks later, we're on to the next month now, I have not seen a single news outlet give the location of the baby. The only one that's actually giving specific information about the whereabouts of her baby is her herself. So what we all know is that Ashley was a scorned woman on Valentine's Day, because this was, remember, posted on Valentine's Day. She wasn't getting the attention that she wanted from Elon Musk. And it wasn't just money. It wasn't just attention. It was, of course, power. And we all saw Elon Musk in the White House right next to Donald Trump with one of his other sons from Grimes in the White House. And that's something that I'm going to prove to you guys later. A big component as to how Ashley St. Clair operates is she's very power hungry. Okay. Trust me. I will prove that to you guys later. So this was her kind of saying, you know what, here, Elon, if you don't give me the attention and power I want, I'm full force ready to expose you on social media. But to Elon's credit, he didn't give her a single inch. So that's what made her go even more scorched earth. And now she's filing a lawsuit against him, saying that he must take a paternity test and that she wants full custody of the son. It has gotten so messy, guys. And the funniest part of this all is in her original post, she goes, I'm posting this because I want the media to honor our child's privacy. Like, she's like a Meghan Markle. All she wants is privacy. Oh my gosh. But of course, the next day after she posts this, she does an exclusive sit-down photo shoot and article with the New York Post written by her personal friend and source of the New York Post, John Levine, which, by the way, I know this because when I was friends with her a couple years ago, she bragged to me about how she has a friend and a source at the New York Post, John Levine. That's who wrote her article about her children's book, Elephants Are Not Birds. Who cares? I'll show you the screenshots here, written by John Levine, and this is who authored her newest article, okay? So let's dive into that article, because it is comical. Okay, guys, so I highlighted the important parts, but let's go into this. So this is her wanting privacy article that she had taken in her apartment that costs around allegedly 40 grand a month in the financial district of New York City that Elon Musk pays for. Yeah. I'm really concerned about the danger of your child when he has you decked out in a $40K a month apartment with private security, a private chef, and multiple private nannies. Anyways, I digress. So this is, she decides to take a photo shoot looking like a vampire in the worst way. She's wearing a corset. Girl, You can afford a spray tan, like get one, especially before a photo shoot that you put together. In an exclusive sit down from her glitzy Manhattan pad Saturday, Ashley St. Clair, this is a day after her original Twitter post, described the 53-year-old Tesla and SpaceX mogul as funny and down to earth, but claimed that he wanted to keep their baby a secret for everyone's safety. St. Clair broke the internet on Friday, this was Valentine's Day, when she posted on X that she gave birth to Musk's alleged baby 5 months ago, a revelation she said she was forced to make due to prying tabloid reporters. That was a lie. This was, of course, a narrative that she orchestrated because she wanted to say, anyone trying to criticize me, they're trying to dox my baby. They're putting my baby at harm's way. Who could put an infant at harm's way? This was her trying to attack any one of her potential critics, okay? And trust me, I know that's how she operated because I used to be friends with her. She was very strategic on how she operated with everything. Again, stay tuned because I will prove that to you. Ashley and Elon have been privately working towards the creation of an agreement about raising their child for some time. It is disappointing that a tabloid reporter who repeatedly ambushed Ashley and her family made it impossible to complete that process confidentially. Oh my gosh, I can't say that word. Confidentially. Her representative Brian Glicklick said in a statement on X Saturday, by the way, Sam Parker and Laura Loomer have exposed her representative as being paid for by the Israeli government. Did I mention that Ashley is Jewish? Side note, she has called me anti-Semitic. Anyways, we'll continue. We are waiting for Elon to publicly acknowledge his parental role with Ashley to end unwarranted speculation, and Ashley trusts that Elon intends to finish their agreement quickly in the best interests of the well-being and security of the child they share. So as you can see, this like cute little photo shoot, by the way, you see that little bracelet right there? Apparently, it costs $15,000. I'm not kidding. Apparently, that is a $15K bracelet. Yes, here it is again. You know how like she has it strategically placed, right? It's like matching this chessboard that is incorrectly set up. Of course, she needed the $15,000 bracelet to match this totally not planned, not pre-planned photo shoot with the New York Post with her best friend John Levine and her personal source at the New York Post. Oh my gosh, no way. This was all just, I woke up like this with my $15,000 bracelet on and with the New York Post in my apartment because, I wanted privacy. Give me a break, bitch. She claimed that she was restricted from telling more than a close-knit circle of people that she was even carrying a child. I was told to keep it a secret. I was being asked to keep it a secret forever, claimed St. Clair, declining to provide a reason for the confidentiality or any material proof that Musk is the biological father. Well, I mean, she promised to keep it a secret, but she didn't because she told literally everyone, okay? I'll get into that later, but she told everyone. I wasn't even friends with her at the time when she found out she was pregnant, and I still found out because that's how many people she told, okay? There's only one other set of lips of hers that are looser than her mouth-talking lips. And we all know what those lips are. Oh my gosh, that was inappropriate. I should go keep reading. Anyways, Musk allegedly provided her with a lavish apartment in the financial district where rent for a 2-bedroom can soar to nearly $40,000 a month, according to StreetEasy, with a hefty security detail, but no romance, St. Clair said. Oh gosh, you know what? I really think that when Ashley was seeking to seduce Elon Musk, she was looking for a romantic, amazing, beautiful, down-to-earth, godly relationship. Not the fact that he was an unattractive, overweight guy, but happens to be the richest man in the world. No, I don't think she wanted romance. I think she wanted money and power. You can call me crazy or you could call me obviously correct. Anyways, she continues, I was completely isolated during my pregnancy. Every part of my career and everything I used to do, I couldn't do anymore. I was told not to tell anybody. Again, she told everybody. And also, hey, Ashley, remember that other baby you have? If you were forced to be isolated and you weren't able to leave your apartment, maybe now's the time to actually be a mother to your other kid. Because I remember when I was friends with her, she always had a full-time nanny. She always wanted every excuse not to be home with her baby. It's like, she doesn't ever mention her other baby. All she says is, oh my gosh, I couldn't keep doing what I wanted to do as a career. And this is the problem with all these so-called conservatives, right? Is they claim that they hate feminism and that they hate the boss babe culture, but they're a bunch of boss babes. They prioritize their career over family and over creating kids way more. Trust me, that's why most of them are single mothers, not married, and still sleeping around with everyone. And that's why I don't blame people like people in the red pill manosphere types that say that anyone that claims to be tradwife, conservative, whatever, they're a bunch of lying phonies. And I totally get where they're coming from, okay? And as you'll see, is Ashley St. Clair kind of would grift and claim that she wanted just to get married and settle down and blah, blah, blah. But trust me, she is the biggest boss babe of them all. I remember her actually telling me that she was pissed that she got pregnant with her first baby because she, quote unquote, like worked so hard to get where she was in the corporate ladder.
you know, climbing that corporate ladder, if you know what I mean. And now it's all thrown away because she has a baby. But of course it wasn't thrown away because she just hired a nanny, and that's why she was able to travel out of the country and get knocked up allegedly by Elon Musk. And that's why she was able to travel to Italy for these conferences. That's why she's able to go to all these political events. And guess what? Hey, do you see me at political events? The only political event you've seen me at since I've had my daughter was AmFest. I didn't even go to the event. I went to the hotel and I couldn't even enjoy hanging out with people because I was too busy chasing my daughter around the hotel lobby. Because why would I want to go anywhere without my daughter? Because that's my priority. I don't understand how mothers feel justified. Like, I could not imagine leaving the country and not seeing my daughter. Maybe I'm too attached. I don't know. But if your kids are actually your life, then treat them like that. Anyways, let's continue. You're almost done. St. Clair emphasized she was willing to stay silent because it would also protect her newborn's privacy until a tabloid, which she declined to name, started snooping around. And that's what allegedly, she claims, led her to unleash the shocking X announcement on Friday, Valentine's Day, accusing the media of trying to do her and her baby harm. Fake news, obviously debunked. No media was actually trying to put the story out. So many people, by the way, knew that she was pregnant and had Elon Musk's baby. They could have gone to the tabloids. Everyone knew about it. This was not some secret information. The only reason she posted it on Valentine's Day was because she was a woman scorned, not getting the power, access, and attention from Elon Musk that she thought she deserved. So let me clear that up real quick. And then she says, I cannot explain the primary pain you feel as a mother, and you're talking to people and they ask you about the one kid and you have to lie and carry this burden in secret. You have to lie to the people you love. This is hilarious because, as I will show you guys in these new unreleased messages that I have from her and from my former coworkers at Arsenal Media Group, Ashley loves lying. She loves manipulating. She is a piece of shit, okay? Listen, the fact that she literally said it's hard for her to lie to the people that she loves is comical. And you'll see why. Just stay tuned, okay? I promise. Here's Elon with the other son that she was jealous was not her son. She wants to be in the Oval Office, obviously. Here she is, okay? $15,000 necklace. Vampire needs a spray tan. And then she says, I am a good mom, and that's what drives most of my decisions, and my kids are my whole world. Really? Then why did you get so upset that up here you said, I'm so isolated, every part of my career and everything I used to do, I couldn't do anymore. If you being a mom is your whole world, who the fuck cares about your career? Because I sure as hell don't as a mom, okay? Who cares? Literally, who cares? Anyways, the only time she talks about being a mom is when she wants to use it for sympathy points and for her to gain, like, you know, points in the conservative media space. So let's move on. Okay, guys, and 7 days after Ashley St. Clair posts that nuclear bomb on X that she allegedly has Elon Musk's 13th kid, she files a lawsuit against Elon Musk, wanting him to claim the paternity and to give her sole custody, which is something that Elon Musk has never even claimed, that he wants full custody of his kids. He basically has made it very clear that he wants to spread his seed far and wide and create a bunch of new kids and make a bunch of different women his baby-making machines. Anyways, what led Ashley to this decision was Elon's refusal to engage with her on X. And this was very comical because she was posting and responding to Elon and being like, Elon, why are you not responding to me? You won't respond to my texts, yet you keep tweeting. And Elon would even respond to people that were condemning Ashley and exposing her, like myself, Laura Loomer, and Milo, which was very telling. And Elon Musk also proceeded to unfollow Ashley on X. And knowing Ashley behind the scenes, that's probably pissed her off like no other. Anyways, this is from Gene Francis. I don't know how to pronounce his name. I've seen Ashley actually attack this guy. Anyways, he said, Elon and Ashley now in heartbreak fight on X. Elon commented on a post by Milo showing that Ashley was the ultimate gold digger, having carefully followed her plan to get inseminated by Elon over a decade. And I have the text to prove that. Just wait. Postpartum Valentine's Day depressed Ashley while feeding her new Elon baby. Interpreted the comment as a passive-aggressive attack. Ashley now trying to leverage inconsistencies between Elon Musk's behavior and past decisions by his TOS team. We've been here for way too often. This does not end well. I recommend Elon avoids New York for 5 years. That's where Ashley lives. And as you guys can see here, this is actually from 5 years ago. Ashley's responding to Greg Price on Twitter. And Greg Price said he's got a kid with a woman already, seems unlikely to work out. And Ashley said, well, he has actually 7 kids and goes through women pretty fast. And then this is recently, Ashley tweeted out after she posted the expose on Elon Musk on Twitter. It's interesting that Elon is responding to this clearly in jest screenshot that was discussed with his team months ago in a documented call. Now he decides to respond to it publicly from an account that posted underage photos of me as if he wasn't asking me to have more children with him last week. I would like to take this offline for our child's sake and have been attempting to do so for weeks. Stop using your child as a bargaining piece. I mean, she's literally trying to use their child as emotional blackmail, as emotional leverage to get Elon to do what she wants. This is sick, okay? And then she continued and said, FYI, the security team on Elon's own platform locked the account he is now responding to for a week for posting a non-consensual underwear photo of me as a child. there is rumors that Ashley's not actually 26, that she's actually 31, which would make this not underage photos of her. Either way, these are photos that she posted of herself online. So nice. Good job. Good job. Anyway, so in this lawsuit that Ashley filed against Elon Musk, because she hired me to replace her position at Arsenal Media Group when she was pregnant with her first baby daddy. And let me tell you, she was hell to work with. Literally, she would cuss people out in group chats, including our boss, in public group chats, literally be like, this is the worst effing piece of shit I've ever seen. What the F is wrong with you? She would give you no precise direction, just make you redo things a million times. And she literally would make the work environment awful. And trust me, I can't stand people that complain about mean bosses or mean coworkers. It's just like, do the product, do what you need to get paid to do. But she was on a whole nother level. And I wish I could show you screenshots of her being psychotic, but all of our work communications was done on the app Telegram. And if you can delete messages that delete for both you and everyone else. So before she quit, she strategically deleted all of her messages that were so bad. Very smart from her. By the way, guys, she randomly quit and she demanded a severance pay, which you only get severance pay if you get fired. But she just wrote like this page, like multiple pages long list of grievances, like literally the founders of America did to Great Britain when they were trying to gain independence from Great Britain. All the grievances, which was basically a letter of blackmail to our boss to force him to pay her like 3 months pay. I believe, I'm not sure exactly how much money she got, but she got what she asked for because she essentially blackmailed our boss. So that's just how she operates. She thinks that she can quit and then still demand a severance pay. Like, this is the entitlement and delusion that she operates with. Okay. Now let me start showing you guys. So I don't have the messages that she sent, but I do have messages from other former employees explaining how awful Ashley is and complaining. Okay. And let me tell you, I of course had to black out their names because I'm not trying to get anyone roped in, because so many people are afraid to come against Ashley because of all the connections that she has to the biggest people in right-wing media. Now, they've been texting me, thank you for exposing her because she's the worst, but I'm afraid to put my name and to attach my name to this because I don't want her to ruin my life and career. This is why I'm doing this, because she cannot be taken seriously anymore. She cannot have a voice in this movement that can just destroy someone's reputation with a blink of an eye. Okay, let's go through these messages. Someone said, Ashley has really bad info. And I go, yes, she does. She said, Jason, which was our former boss, the CEO of Arsenal, she said Jason was banned from Mar-a-Lago and didn't go last night, which isn't true. And then I said she has called me.
Okay, so this is Isabella Moody, who used to work with Ashley St. Clair and was supposedly best friends with Ashley. All right, let's get back to the more cerebral two-way Tonight Show.
Newsom's presidential aspirations were dead on arrival. The wildfires that he handled that were done. And watching this today, I take a step back and say, whoa, okay, maybe he's going to figure it out. People aren't even thinking about that anymore. The one thing that I think was very smart for him to go on Charlie Kirk, we'll see, or have him on and see how many more crossover media he does. It's like he realized that he's no longer running for governor of California, but president of the United States. And so he's tweaking that a little bit. His big issue is that his words don't align with his actions. And so even though he did go a little bit to the right on that issue, if you look at his record in California, it does not match that. And it's a very...
So I don't mind Gavin Newsome as California's governor. He's not just a left-winger. I agree with Halperin that he'd make probably a formidable candidate for the Democratic Party. He would have been a far better presidential candidate than Kamala Harris.
New awakening. And if I were advising Gavin Newsome, I would say, go and take a look at all the extreme things you've done in California, including that, and start mea culping some of that now. I mean, start walking some of it, not when you're going to Iowa or South Carolina for the first time. Go and start fixing some of that now. You have time, go do it. But I was surprised, very surprised, and I'm saying here now that I was wrong before, and I think he is someone to keep an eye on.
All right, Alex, besides the fact that they shared that set to record the video podcast, what is something that Gavin Newsome and Charlie Kirk have in common?
A fondness for media attention?
Well, yes, but they're both fans of two-way. They're both regular watchers of two-way, by the way, which is part of why we're so proud of the platform, because I don't know too many things they're both fans of, but in terms of media, but they both like two-way. What do you think of that exchange that he had with his guest, Charlie?
I thought it's an interesting. First of all, I thought it was interesting that Newsome decided to do this podcast. Even before the show popped last night, it was within the top 30, top 25 on the Spotify charts. Yeah. So I thought that the fact that Newsome went ahead and did this podcast, I thought it was a pretty savvy move. It got him a lot of attention. And for him to put Kirk on his first podcast, I think it was also a savvy move. It also got him a fair amount of attention.
Yeah.
It was surprising to see Newsome do this, though, because he's always been he's always cast himself as a trailblazer on LGBTQ-related issues. When he was mayor of San Francisco, he legalized gay marriage. And
not just to cast himself. He came out for same-sex marriage before Nancy Pelosi, before the Clintons, before Barack Obama. So not just cast himself, but he'd walk the walk on that.
Yeah, and that was during the 2004 campaign, and he really got crosswise with the National Democratic Party and John Kerry, and they were the Democratic Party at that point was trying to distance itself from the notion of gay marriage. So I thought it was really surprising that he did this today.
I'll say this: when Gavin Newsome announced he was doing a new podcast, I didn't love, from a theatrical point of view, I didn't love his video announcing it. He took a lot of heat from people who said, "You're still governor. Why are you doing this? You should be focused on your job." And today we're giving him credit for kind of the optics of having Charlie Kirk on. I will say, I think that conversation, almost regardless of what they ended up talking about, I haven't had a chance to listen to it yet, except for that clip. I think it's great. I think it's people can say it's a gimmick. They could say it's this shameless appeal to some new audience. But I think it's great that those two guys would sit down and have a conversation. They're both very reasonable guys. They're both brilliant. Again, I'll tell you, don't think Gavin Newsome's dumb. He's brilliant. They're both brilliant. They're both super interested in technology and democratization. Gavin wrote a book about it. Charlie lives it every day. It's fantastic. It's fantastic that they sat down, and I look forward to seeing who else he has on. And if I end up having an extra hour in the next 5 days, I'll listen to the whole thing. All right, one last thing about the Democrats. We just did two things for the Democrats that we think were pretty good. I think we all agree. Rokana tweet, good. Gavin Newsom sitting down with Charlie Kirk, good. Here is a video that is so being questioned, I'll say, that Brit Hume, when he tweeted the video, tweeted and said, "Is this really real? Is this like AI?" Here is some female Democratic members of Congress doing something. This is number 6. You know me, I'm not judgmental. I try to just let things happen. Kristen, if you had been shown that before it aired and you were inclined to help those ladies out, what would you have said they should do with that video?
I would have deleted it and make sure that none of them had it on their phones ever again. And we didn't do that again. I mean, I always go back to 2016 when Hillary Clinton, they did the whole fight song mashup. I mean, I don't think I've laughed so hard. I mean, I still watch it now just to laugh.
Let me ask you a question about the video we just watched. And did you guys seen it before? You guys already seen it?
I saw it on social media, but I don't know what it is. Is it like a TikTok thing? Like
I think so.
It was a TikTok thing like 3 years ago.
Kristen, I know this may seem obvious to some, but what's wrong with that video? Why do we all react so negatively to it?
It's not authentic. It's a bunch of, I mean, and it's not really topical right now. And it's, I think they could have found other ways. They're putting these congresswomen in positions where, they look a little awkward, a little uncomfortable. They're trying to be cool. It's, trying to make it happen. And it's not really like a universal thing. I think that's from X-Men or something. I don't know. I don't do video games. I don't know what it is, but it's not universal. And so people look at that and saying, you're trying too hard. You're a try hard.
Yeah.
Staged.
It's too staged. It's like that other video where they all made the same video about Trump. It's like too stagey. Alex, Alex, would you have deleted that if you were them?
Well, I was surprised when I saw it because I didn't really quite know what it was. I thought the audio and video were quite poor. But this may actually be a better question for Kristen, because as a reporter, when I see something like that come out, I would look at the operatives or the staff members who work for them, and I would say, how did they all agree that this was a good idea?
Yeah.
Because it's hard to get that many people to agree on one thing. And so you think that there would be staff members or operatives working for these people who would say, let's not do this.
Right.
And that's what
you would think that. All right. Now
they're sitting in a conference room in DC. They haven't been back to like their home states or real world in a long time. And they're just saying, this is really great. This is awesome. Our bosses are so cool. And it's just so, again, inauthentic. It's just didn't work.
I can't believe no one used the word cringe, which is really the right word. All right. Noah, did I cover everything we need to cover? I think I did.
Yeah, you did a pretty good job. There's a lot.
Right. Thank you for that. All right. Now it is time for your questions. Again, remember, top of the hour, 7 Eastern time on another YouTube two-way channel. You can.
Strikes me that the Commerce Secretary seemed to be kind of a little more front and center. I don't know if that's just because of the media I happen to consume. Or not.
So,
that seems really unusual to me. And I'm wondering if that's unusual to you guys and what that means, if anything.
Right. So I'll give you a brief history here, okay? Bessent was a big supporter of Trump and really wanted to be Treasury Secretary and worked on it for a long time. I believe he raised the second most money for him, and he's extremely qualified for the job. Lutnick wanted the job too and was ahead of the transition and tried to pull a Dick Cheney and make himself Treasury Secretary. And that was blocked, not just by Scott Bessent, but by others who don't think Lutnick plays nicely with others and thought it was bad, not good, not cricket for him to give himself the job. Lutnick took Commerce reluctantly, but was given the tariff portfolio, which in this administration everybody knew would be a big thing. So part of why you're seeing him out there is he loves being in the media. He loves it. So he makes a lot of time for it. Partly is because he's the tariff czar, and partly because He's from New York, so he's very well connected in the media. A lot of people in the media know him. It's going to be interesting to see as we go forward here, because Bessent's doing a fair amount of press too, whether those two will play nicely with each other and who Trump will think is better on TV. I don't think Lutnick's ever been in government before, and Bessent definitely hasn't. And I find Lutnick's on-air presence to be very Trumpian. He's kind of got the affect to Donald Trump. And so I'm sure Trump likes that, but I know also he thinks Scott Bessent's super smart and good on TV too. So in the world of Donald Trump, where performance on television and casting is so important, keep your eye on, who gets on the better shows, who Trump seems to favor. But right now, there's plenty of work to do. And Bessent, even though Bessent's involved in tariffs, he has a place in that lane, but he's got a lot of other lanes he's in as well. Alex, thoughts?
Well, I thought it was, so the first time I realized that Lutnick really wanted to become sort of an outsized media figure was during the Madison Square Garden rally in late October, when Lutnick went up on stage and he was right next to Elon Musk, and he was, sort of guttural yells, sort of bombastic. And it was interesting because this was the final 10 days of the campaign. And here was a guy who was putting himself out there front and center. Howard Lutnick's not exactly a guy who is going to swing voters in, Pennsylvania or Wisconsin or Michigan. But the fact that he was out there showed that he really was determined to become a player, a media figure.
It's not just these two in the cabinet. The cabinet overall, I mean, look back at Secretary of State Marco Rubio right after the, Oval Office meeting with, on Ukraine. I mean, his interview went viral. I mean, everyone I know was sending it and tweeting out what a great job he did. And so everyone in the cabinet really, I think, has a gift to be a perfect spokesperson for their agency, for their cause. I mean, Brooke Rollins out there, Secretary of Ag, Brooke Rollins.
Follow up, are you all good?
Yeah, I mean, I'm wondering is there any indicator that Bessent is not that influential, and that Lutnick, even from a seat in Commerce, is somehow
Bessent is super influential. He's super influential. Part of the advantage a Treasury Secretary has is it's across the street from the White House, and so being with Trump is super important. Trump is a who's in front of me kind of guy. So part of how Bessent got the job of Treasury Secretary was he camped out at Mar-a-Lago for almost the entire transition. And as soon as he left, people were like, you got to get back here because Bessent's here, because Lutnick's there the whole time because he's doing the transition. And I believe he's learned that lesson. And so he's at the White House quite a bit. He crosses over through the East Wing to the West Wing to get more face time with the president. Lutnick's there a lot too. And you've seen him in photo ops. You've seen the president recognize him. He's got a longer relationship with the president, which matters to Donald Trump, but he likes Bessent a lot. So they're both super influential. But I predict, well, I shouldn't say I predict. It's possible that like in a great wrestling match, only one man can leave alive. We'll see if that does happen.
What was what was actually on my mind today was I was thinking about how back in 2021, 2022, the whole rage that Wall Street was making money off of was SPACs, and even at that time former president had his own deal, launching his media company, merging his media company with a SPAC, and now it seems that kind of thing has died off, and we've moved on to meme coins.
Book thing. Kristen, what way is Governor Glenn Youngkin of Virginia, who you know well, most like Donald Trump?
Oh, geez. Well, I think they both have a unique, political talent of connecting with people, right? And so if you look back at the governor's race in 2021, what the governor had done so well was connect with the voters. And, I think Bill Clinton is another example of a politician like that. Someone that when they're talking to you, you feel like you're the only person they're talking to. I think Trump is a master at that, once in a generation, but I think the governor is very, very good at that. That's why he did so well in that race, and why he's such an effective communicator.
Now that you've revised your position on Gavin Newsom, who is more likely to someday be president, Gavin Newsom or Glenn Youngkin?
Oh, why would you ask questions like that? That's not nice.
Okay, coming towards the end of the
not
show.
In front of them. Tanina, we learned.
All right, this is Orthodox Rabbi Adam Mintz.
Zachin la'adam shelo befanav ve'ein chavin la'adam shelo befanav. So he says Zachin la'adam shelo befanav, that you can do a favor for somebody even if it's not in front of him. Okay, we'll come back to that and we'll explain that in a minute. One last thing, then I'll explain the whole thing. I'll go off the screen and I'll explain it. The Gemara says right here, Amar Reb Yosef, line 9 or number 9, Higdilu Yachol Limchos. When they reach, it says majority. That's not what it means. When they reach adulthood, they can protest. They can say, I don't like my life. I don't like my conversion. Okay, so what do we have here? We have a couple of very interesting things. The Gemara says that what is the mechanism by which...
So the Gemara is the Talmud, and it was written approximately 2,000 years ago.
You convert a minor, that you convert a child. The mechanism by which you convert a child is that the Kabbalah HaMitzvos, the acceptance of the mitzvos, is not done by the child, because the child can't understand what Kabbalah HaMitzvos means.
So to convert to Judaism, you have to be willing to take on the burden of the kingdom of heaven, to take on the burden of Jewish law. But a child under the age of 12 is not an adult, and so how do they pull this off?
But the Bezdin, the court, the rabbis there, or the parents, they accept the mitzvos on behalf of the child. That is...
So this is a little bit like my idea of vouch nationalism. That you should have to have a certain number of people vouch for you if you want to get a driver's license, and then if you do something terrible while you're driving, then the people who vouch for you should have to pay some sort of penalty, some percentage of the penalty that you get. You should have to have a certain number of vouchers to be able to fly in a plane or to enter particularly valuable territory such as Manhattan or Beverly Hills. So I like this idea that the Beit Din, the Jewish law court, the community takes the responsibility on to themselves.
Is based on the principle of Zachin la'adam shelo b'fan. It's almost Pesach. All of us are going to run to the rabbi and sell our chametz before Pesach. But there's always somebody, right? There's always somebody.
So chametz are the grains that a Jew's not allowed to own during Passover, but you don't want to throw them out. What you do is you put them in a cupboard, you seal them off, and then you go through a process of selling them to a non-Jew.
Somebody who forgets to go to the rabbi. Oh no, what do, right? They forget to go to the rabbi, they sit down at the Seder, and they say, we didn't sell our chametz. What do they have to do?
So one of the things I love about Orthodox Judaism is its ability to navigate the different desires for individual freedom and what's best for the community. And so the Orthodox way of life is much more communal than the Western secular way of life.
They have to throw out all the food in the cabinet. They have to throw out all the food in the refrigerator. So the answer is no, because when the rabbi sells the chametz and he gives all the forms to the non-Jew to whom he sells the chametz, and he says you can go into anybody's house, you can eat the chametz, and here are the keys, and here's the landlord, and here's the doorman, and all those things. The rabbi always adds, right, Rabbi Silverberg? The rabbi adds, and there might be somebody who forgot to sell their chametz. And I'm including them in the sale as well. What right does the rabbi have to include someone to sell their chametz? They didn't contact the rabbi or anything. Maybe they didn't want to sell their chametz. So it's based on a rule. The rule is what? Some very zachin la'adam shelo b'fanav. That you do something good for somebody, even if it's not in front of them, even if they don't know that you're doing it for them. We assume, correctly, let me say, that everybody wants to sell their chametz. So therefore, the rabbi says, "Zachin la'adam shelo b'fanav." I want to do a favor for someone, even though it's not in their presence. That rule is exactly the same rule here. The child wants to become Jewish. But the child doesn't know enough to accept the mitzvahs. But it's a good thing to become Jewish. It's a privilege to become Jewish. And therefore, Zachin la'adam shelo b'fanav. We perform that privilege for the child, even though the child doesn't necessarily understand.
And a good comment in the chat that my vouch idea fails the friction test. It'll just be too much of a hassle. And that's right, but we need to shift society more towards a corporate model so that individuals who do terrible things, it's not just them as individuals who pay the price, but everyone who enabled them.
Understand what Kabbalah HaMitzvot says. But the child does have the right, when they become of age, limchos, they can protest. If the child reaches 13 years old in 5 days, 1 day, doesn't matter, and they say, I don't like my life. I became a big college football fan, and I want to watch college football on Shabbos, or whatever it is, or I love cheeseburgers, and I don't want to convert. So when he or she reaches adulthood, they are allowed to protest and to not accept the conversion. Now, whether or not that happens or it doesn't happen, we'll see in a minute. But
okay, so this is a 6-part series on Orthodox conversion to Judaism, and he's talking here about a fascinating story that happened in Denver from 1977 to 83.
And the topic for today is the Denver conversion Beit Din, 1977 to 1983. This is a story that is not well known enough. So share it with your friends. It's a fascinating story. Rabbi Stanley Wagner was a musmach, was a rabbi from Yeshiva University, from Retz. He also had a PhD from Yeshiva University. He was really the linchpin of Orthodox Judaism in Denver. From 1972 until 1998, he was the rabbi of Beis Medrash Hagadol, an Orthodox shul in Denver. Now, this Orthodox shul is interesting on its own because it was one of the few Orthodox shuls that was part of the OU, even though it didn't have a mechitza. That in itself is a fascinating story. But he was the leading.
And Kip says, wow, this is such a strange religion. It's all about rules and how to get around rules and finding loopholes. Well, it's not inherently strange. It's strange because you grew up in a Christian country where religion's supposedly about some affirmation of the heart. But Judaism is a national religion. So it used to be that all religions were national, that your tribe would have a religion and people were variously committed to it, but your tribe had its religion and other tribes had their religion. And so nowadays there's religion, all right, outside of tribe and outside of nation. But Judaism comes from the ancient world where every tribe, every nation had their own religion. And Judaism being approximately 4,000 years old, all right, today it seems strange that one particular tribe has its own religion. But this was the way of the world until the development of Christianity 2,000 years ago.
Orthodox rabbi in Denver. In 1977, Rabbi Wagner was meeting with a couple. They actually were philanthropists, contributors to his synagogue. And in the middle of the premarital meeting, he met with the parents and with the kids who were getting married. It turned out that the mother of the bride had a conservative conversion, meaning that she was converted by conservative rabbis, and that the mikveh that they used was a swimming pool. Rabbi Wagner gathered 2 other Orthodox rabbis, and he had the daughter immerse at the last minute before her wedding. The mother was very unhappy with the situation and couldn't believe that basically she had thought she was Jewish all these years, and now the rabbi was telling her that she wasn't Jewish. Now, with that story from 1977, I want to back up a little bit. The first Jews came to Denver in the 1859 gold rush. No, the Jews didn't go for the gold. The Jews were the ones who ran the grocery stores, and they ran the clothing stores, and all the people who went out west, they needed the Jews to provide all of their provisions and clothing for them. But the Jewish community in Denver grew. By 1927, there were 17,000 Jews in Denver. And after the Second World War, especially in the 60s and 70s and then the 80s, the Orthodox community grew in Denver, specifically not only the modern Orthodox community, but there was a right-wing Orthodox community as well. There actually was a yeshiva in Denver for young men, for what we would call boys and girls.
So Jews didn't think that looking for gold was a solid way to make a living. So instead, they developed businesses that catered to people who are looking for gold. it's like the old joke that the Goy buys Viagra, the Jew buys Pfizer stock.
And I remember when I was in high school that everybody from the West seemed to go to this yeshiva in Denver. So it was an important Orthodox center. But on the other hand, in the late 1970s, between 1975 and 1980, the intermarriage rate in Denver was over 72%. Now that's a crazy number, 72%, especially when you consider the fact that there was a strong Orthodox community and a strong Haredi community, right-wing Orthodox community. So their intermarriage rate was next to zero. So it means that the left of Orthodox community, the intermarriage rate was very, very high. Now, this is important to understand. Up to now, we've talked about situations where the intermarriage rate was such that the question was, should you encourage conversion? Because by encouraging conversion, maybe you're encouraging intermarriage. Now, that's an issue if intermarriage is 5% or 10% or 20%. You don't want to encourage intermarriage. But if intermarriage is in the 70% rate, then all of a sudden, conversion plays a completely different role. It's not that you don't want to encourage conversion, but the question is maybe you want to encourage conversion because the more people who convert, the fewer people who are going to intermarry. So this is a critical turning point in the American Jewish attitude towards conversion. That the rate of conversion, the rate of intermarriage is so high that conversion actually has the potential to serve as a way to fight intermarriage by making sure that the weddings are in weddings because the person converted, and therefore a Jew is marrying another Jew. Okay. With that, I want to tell you a story. In the 1970s in Denver, there was an unofficial relationship between Rabbi Stephen Foster, who was a Reform rabbi in Denver, and Rabbi Jerome Lipsitz, who was one of the Orthodox rabbis. Rabbi Foster used to send his Reform converts to Rabbi Lipsitz, and Rabbi Lipsitz used to convert them, get two other Orthodox rabbis, and convert them with some kind of loose understanding that they would be observant. Now, that relationship, actually, that's a tricky relationship. Because for an Orthodox rabbi to convert somebody who studied, who comes from the Reform movement, means that they're both technically in terms of observance, but also sociologically in terms of the working together with the Reform movement was potentially very much suspect within the community. In 1976, these rabbis, Rabbi Foster and Rabbi Lipsitz, shared this arrangement with the Denver Rabbinic Council. The Denver Rabbinic Council was like the New York Board of Rabbis. It was the board of rabbis that had as its members Orthodox, Conservative, and Reform rabbis. When they shared this arrangement with the Denver Rabbinical Council, there was some appeal by some of the non-Orthodox, and there was some opposition specifically by the Orthodox who thought that Orthodox rabbis should not be converting people who come from the Reform movement. Let's put that on hold for 1 second. The following year, 1977, there were two guest speakers in Denver. And again, Denver is a small Jewish community, so the guest speakers are brought not just for the Orthodox, but they're brought and and attracted members of all the different denominations. The first was Rabbi Eliezer Berkovitz. Rabbi Berkovitz was an important Orthodox philosopher from Chicago, someone who was very well respected within the Orthodox community. And his talk was about, at that time, there was an argument in Israel famous about who is a Jew. And Rabbi Berkovitz said that the who is a Jew debate is destroying Jewish unity. And he basically gave a lecture about the importance of Jewish unity. Around the same time, Rabbi Shlomo Riskin, who was then the rabbi of Lincoln Square Synagogue, he came and he actually talked about conversion. And he said that conversion is an ongoing process, is not just a process that ends with going to the mikvah, but something that needs to be a lifelong commitment.
Okay, we got some breaking news here from the president. And so we switch over to the White House. Here we go. This is good.
But this president won't let it happen. We're going to get them out. We're coming up to get you. I've authorized Elon. I said, can you get them out? Because, they've been left up there. I hope they like each other. But maybe they'll love each other. I don't know. But they've been left up there. Think of it. And I see the woman with the wild hair, good solid head of hair she's got. There's no kidding. There's no games with her hair. But, and there's a danger up there too. They can have some failures up there that would be very bad. You got to get them out. So I've authorized Elon a week ago. I said, we have two people up there that Biden and Kamala left up there. And he knows it very well. I said, are you equipped to get him? He said, yeah, he's got a Starship. And they're preparing it right now. And so Elon is going to go up but this president won't let it happen. We're going to get them out.
Okay, thank God. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.